Finish your point. So these are all necessary.
No, I didn't.
Some of them are necessary, some of them might not
as
be.
As I'm just saying, look, what I object to, Christo, is the kind of knee-jerk, right-wing response that, oh, look at all this, look at all these crangos, look at all this government doing all these bad things, and I just find it so kind of anodyne and banal. Like this, why we have to go through these line by lines. You think it requires expertise to decide what is useful, what isn't. Are the people in there doing a good job? Maybe the answer is yes, and maybe the answer is no. I don't know. What I object to is kind of having a wholesale objection to this policy platform. The government was elected on a specific platform. It needed people who are experts in the field to help implement that agenda. So you could argue about the way it's gone about that, but I think that it needs a level of expertise that none of us has in this room to be able to comment on that properly.
So there we go. The government doesn't have expertise itself. It needs to hire the expertise at the cost of relief. Jonathan has just said that government has no expertise.
I didn't say that.
That's his point.
I didn't say that. It requires people who have specific expertise in those policy areas to help implement the government's agenda. I'm not saying that ministers not all ministers are going to sort of have PhDs in the fields that they supervise.
I disagree with all of that, actually, and the point I made before you came in. I'm sort of throwing little grenades at you, Jonathan, as
really,
you know.
That's someone like you.
But I think that some of these will be necessary without a shadow of a doubt. It's the extent of them that I think people will be objecting to. I mean, is that a fair analysis, or do you say get rid of them all?
Well, we discussed this earlier when I was saying that actually one of the major obstacles that the government is already saying that it's encountering is just the sheer scale of the machine when it comes to government bureaucracy. And I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing to have little bodies that are perhaps focused on how to avoid the obstacles that are put in the government's way. But actually, I don't think that Keir Starmer is necessarily the person who will look at these and think, yes, this is a good opportunity to cut regulation, to, downsize this department so that I can get things done. He seems to be far too proceduralist. He seems to take far too long to get anything done. And I think the problem that he will run into is that he will continue to outsource a lot of the decision-making or the advisory roles outside of out of the government to independent experts, to special interest groups, and that will simply contribute to the bogging down of government. These things are often set up with the best intentions. That doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome is good. And I think that, the very fact that we're hearing coming from Number 10, insiders from Number 10 saying Dominic Cummings might have had a point about the sheer scale of the bureaucracy of this country and how that is stopping us from doing anything, I still think that that has to be the priority. And I say that, be you a Labour supporter or a Conservative, you're not going to get the things done that you want to get done by adding more layers to that. You need to get rid of as much of that as you can to push forward your agenda. And that, Labour, we were talking about what it was that Labour were elected on. They were going to get the economy under control. They talked about stopping the budget. But things like house building, they pledged to build an awful lot of housing. You're not going to do that by setting up quangos. You're going to do that by trimming the power of the state.
All right. On that subject, just very quickly before we go to the break, I do want to talk about Boxing Day shopping down 10%. I mean, consumer confidence has never been worse. The CBI a couple of days ago,
Never been worse.
It's okay. It's never been worse since then. Before the pandemic, the figures are worse, as bad as since before the pandemic. Basically, the CBI called it a triple threat that we're heading into recession just a few days ago. Growth has completely flatlined since the new government came in, and yesterday it was revealed that Boxing Day shopping is down 10%. This is all the government's fault, isn't it? For talking down the economy, for having the 3 months of this vacuum where they said that everything was absolutely dreadful, and everything that they've implemented has not led to any growth. Quite the opposite. The economy is flatlining, and this is equating to people not wanting to buy things on Boxing Day sales.
Were you expecting a machine that had basically ground to a halt over several years to suddenly sort of take on wings?
The economy was growing. They inherited a growing economy and falling inflation.
Can you do me a favour? Come on. The economy has been stagnating for years and years and years. Under which government, may I remind you? Your beloved Conservative government, Christo. So it's not possible, as I said to you the other day on the phone, it's not possible to turn it around in 6 months or a year. And we can have this conversation in a few years where the government has made all kinds of decisions, a lot of which I will disagree disagree with, by the way, and I say to you repeatedly that if I was Chancellor, I would make different decisions and I would put the burden on different parts of the economy. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a complete failure. It doesn't mean that all of it's going to be a success.
So it's not their fault
if the government had a silver bullet to fire the economy, any government would fire it. But any decision has trade-offs.
So whose fault is it?
There are all kinds of factors.
That Boxing Day shopping is down 10%.
That people now do their deals earlier, Black Friday, for example.
Exactly. I'm going to go add up your order, bring you back your bill, and once you pay, I can place your order for you.
Doing fantastic. Far from it. There are lots of different factors. I don't think that national insurance is the reason that people think, oh, you know what, maybe I won't go into town on Boxing Day this year to get my goods. I just don't buy it.
All right, listen, I'll get to your response on this in just a moment.
With that,
and then we'll
she's
talk about
on her feet, telling the manager just what went down.
I'm leaving if they're treated like that.
She goes back to her table.
Group. I love this story. Who shipped their T-shirts
Are you guys ready to
4,000
order?
miles
No,
away.
I'm not cool with that either.
As well. Next,
it's really kind of upsetting. Why are they being treated differently than everybody else? Because I've had issues before. With these particular people? No, with people that look just like them. Oh, God. Me too. Holy cow. That is the rudest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Morning, and a lot of you are objecting. Jonathan, I've got to bring this up with you, and then Benedict will get your answer on whose fault is it that no one's shopping at the moment. But Jonathan, a lot of people are very angry with you for comparing the COVID lockdown being traumatic to people to the people who were in the trenches during the war and the adversity that they went.
Did they actually listen to what I said? Did they actually
I can't listen to that imbecile saying COVID was more serious to health than any other situation.
Who's the imbecile? I literally didn't say it.
Does your guest really think that 2 years being mollycoddled by the government is comparable to 5 years at war or 4 years in the trenches? And Andy has just simply said, can we please, when it came to responding to those days or weeks about like people with different diversities or anything else, can we please have a take a break from this?
Oh, it's Christmas time again. It's always the fucking same. As winter payments go, the fucking cost of living grows. Oh, and the freezing OAPs with fuck all under their trees. Reform is our only hope. UK is on its knees. Hey, fuck Christmas, fuck Christmas. It gets worse every year. It's not much joy when you're made a toy and Labour is up your rear. Hey, fuck Christmas, fuck Christmas. It's the fucking worst. We got homeless vets and starving pets, yet we still don't come first. Hey, fuck Christmas, fuck Christmas. It's getting on our tits. You have enough to share, but you still don't care, you bunch of selfish pricks.
The adversity that was faced by older generations and the wars, you brought up the COVID lockdown.
Said that, unlike someone like Lee Anderson, who says that men have to go through the Battle of the Somme, I never said that COVID was comparable to the First World War, Christo.
No, but
I never said
COVID
that.
after we'd spoken about
the
war.
young people have had different stresses from other people in previous generations. People in the First World War, yes, they had a lot of things going on. They didn't have the pubs closed down. So I'm not saying it was better in those days.
So that was quite. I would say that the First World War is more stressful.
Yes,
than
I agree with you. I'm saying that people have different stresses. They're obviously in the round far, far less than what people once had to go through many, many years ago. Obviously, I'm not a complete idiot.
See, aren't you glad I've given you the chance to clarify that?
People did have different things happen in their lives which were very, very damaging to their development, and we have to be generous to that. I'm not saying that young people had to go through the Somme. And by the way, every single person contacting you right now, they didn't go through the Somme either. In fact, the 99.9% didn't even go through the Blitz. And what really annoys me is the boomer generations who talk about our generations. Yo, you don't know hardship. Neither do you, actually. You've had it better than we have, because you actually get a house at £20,000 or £15,000 age 25, and no one of our generation is able to do that. You had jobs for life, you had a great life, and you completely exploited our generations. That's what I say to the boomers.
Mick says older generations were stronger as they had to fight and work for everything. Whilst today, we give it to them on a plate.
Oh, they had it on a plate.
Where were they
Those
fighting?
boomers had it on a plate.
Where were they fighting?
Those boomers had everything given to them on a plate. Our generations had nothing.
It's the weak generation.
We've had non-stop damage since 2008. The people in their 50s and 60s say, oh, you should stop drinking, you all artists. Well, you've had it better than any generation before or since, and that really annoys me.
I was going to say,
sorry for being annoyed, but that really does annoy me.
The generation now that talks about the younger generations being weak because they didn't have to fight anything. Let's think about the conflicts that they might have fought in if they were in the army. Oh, OK. The uprising in Kenya, which didn't end particularly well for us. Suez crisis didn't end particularly well for us. Oh, actually, there's rather a lot of conflicts that didn't end particularly well for us. So, you know, if we're going to be talking about, you know, standing up, fighting for your country, it's probably not the best track record, if we're being honest.
As pointed out, not every single piece of adversity needs to be a war. They had very, very high interest rates. They didn't have, you know, the consumer things that we have nowadays. All the mod cons in the kitchen. They used to have to go outside to the toilet. They used to have to go down coal mines. They didn't have any of those
The people that we are talking about right now in their 50s and 60s did not have to go outside the toilet, did not go down coal mines. This is an idea that we kind of like have had frozen for the last 40 years. They think people in their 60s had it hard. No, they didn't. They really didn't.
Tell that to someone in their 60s.
I will.
To be fair, my pandemic was a bit like the Second World War. I stood behind my front door with my shotgun, shouting about how the fascists were coming for me. I had a difficult lockdown, trust me.
OK, is it, we're running out of time, so is it Labour's fault that no one's shopping on the high street for Boxing Day, and that it's down 10% after the disastrous tax raid from Rachel Reeves, the lies about the £22 billion, the national insurance rise, which was not in the manifesto, and the consumer confidence being eroded by constant negativity and talking down Britain?
Yeah, why not? I'm not going to disagree with that. You're really invested in that. One thing I would say is I'd agree and disagree with Jonathan in terms of talking about stagnation, because I'd agree that it is not entirely Labour's fault. But I wouldn't know. No, come on. I wouldn't even use the word stagnation, and we should stop lying about this. This country has been in recession for a very long time, and successive governments have massaged figures, and they do that partly with, you know, one of the hot topics of the day, which is mass migration. They massage the figures to give the impression that 0.1% growth is real growth. It's not, and you can feel the effects throughout this country of one being in recession. The fact that there are suppressed wages, the fact that people are, you know, huge numbers of people are on in-work benefits, let alone out-of-work benefits. What I would say is, I don't think that Rachel Reeves' budget has at all helped the situation. I think it is a little bit too early to lay all the blame at her feet, but here is my very confident prediction, which is that in 4 or 5 years' time, the situation will be worse. Because actually, I think a lot of the measures that she's put in place and the priorities she's taken are completely the wrong ones. But Happy New Year to everybody.
I'm just reading another taste of some of the messages that we've got in.
Oh, dear. We might want to duck.
No, Emma says, Jonathan, you are right. Common sense all the way.
Who says that?
Emma.
Oh, thanks, Emma.
So, you know, that's nice, but... Oh dear, someone get Jonathan some Feminax, says Anna in Surrey.
What's that supposed to
I don't know.
I think it's a tablet for...
Is that meant to be some kind of homophobic?
No, I don't think it's supposed to be homophobic. I don't think it's homophobic. It's Anna who sent it in Surrey. I don't think it's homophobic.
Is it like saying feminine? I mean, it sounds like it's got the femin in it.
Is it for hysterics? Is that
it's for hysterics? Yes, I think that's what it's supposed to be for. I think is the.
Why can't I have some?
Well, there's an argument to say you probably need it more.
Thank you.
At times.
I want some special things as well.
Thank you. All right, let's talk about this particular story. I love this story. This is Just Stop Oil. Did I give it to you? I think you got it. Just Stop Oil. They ship their T-shirts from 4,000 miles away. Now, this was similar to the story when I exposed one of the founders of Just Stop Oil, who was driving a diesel still to take her children to school and after-school clubs in, I think, the Cotswolds, where she lived. The eco-warriors, notorious for disrupting traffic, bring in merchandise that is imported from 4,000 miles away in the Dominican Republic. Senior Tory Sir Ian Duncan Smith said that Just Stop Oil was demonstrating its do what I say, not as I do attitude. I mean, Just Stop Oil, they are hypocrites and they are a blight on society, aren't they?
I mean, look, if I was doing Just Stop Oil's PR, which is not a job I would ever do, but if I was, I would say, do you think that maybe you should source those T-shirts from such absolutely watertight, ethical places that no one could ever dream of putting you on the front page of the Express to complain about this? That's the first thing I'd say to them.
So they're not very bright, are they?
I just think, look, I don't think that Just Stop Oil has done some important things, because they get people to talk about just stopping oil, and they get people to talk about climate change more generally, which I think is a good thing. And no protest movement has ever sort of proceeded without disruption or without opponents. A lot of, we talk about the suffragettes all the time and all that stuff. People hated them, they complained about them, and they said you should do this through peaceful or non-violent means, etc., and so without disrupting anyone's life. And the fact of life is that when you want to change things, you do sometimes need to disrupt things as well. Do I like the organisation? No. Do I think they've made mistake after mistake? Absolutely.
OK, well, they're a bunch of hypocrites, but Jonathan overwhelmingly supports them. I'm joking. I'm only putting your leg at Christmas, Jonathan.
Well, I mean, you know what I think about Just Stop Oil. I think that they're half-wits. I think that if they weren't half-wits,
this is half-wit behaviour, right?
Yeah, of course it is. And if they weren't, they'd probably be working in a slightly more effective organisation, working for the aims that they want. I don't think that they are particularly effective. I think that there are far more successful organisations that work to affect government policy when it comes to things like energy production. I think that these people are deeply self-indulgent, and I think that actually Jonathan's right. The very fact that nobody thought this through is a sign, frankly, that they just believe that whatever they do will end up going the way that they want it to.
They've called the UK authoritarian because 20 of Just Stop Oil expect Christmas Day in prison.
Well, they shouldn't have been. And there was an outrageous thing that a 77-year-old woman was returned to jail because they couldn't get a tag to fit around her wrist, and so she had to spend Christmas in jail. And she was on bail, Well, she's a return on she's on early release. She was on early release.
Could have been
Look, I think that even you can have all kinds of complaints about Justipol. It is wrong to put people in jail for years for disrupting a road. I'm sorry.
Well, I think if you've been warned many times, maybe.
It's completely outrageous.
On that note, we must end it, and that's it for you as well, Benedict.
Good night from me.
It's good night from me.
It's like the two Ronnies. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? I don't know which one's Ronnie Barker. You're clearly Ronnie Corbett, actually, aren't you?
Nice.
Good morning. Reform UK's membership has officially overtaken the Conservative Party, according to Tracker on their website.
But Kemi Badenoch has hit out at the claim accusing the party of manipulation.
We spoke to Nigel Farage earlier and he had this response.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this rest.
The government's sentencing czar has called for convicts to be sent to open prisons to ease overcrowding.
And a hit for the high street. Boxing Day shoppers are staying away compared to this time last year.
Indeed, a newly unsealed document showed Tony Blair attempts to amend a Jerry Adams statement on IRA disarmaments.
And speculation continues that Russia's anti-aircraft system was responsible for the Azerbaijan Airlines crash, which happened on Christmas Day. However, the Kremlin have responded and denied all allegations, as NATO demands answers.
It's a misty and murky start for many of us today. Join me later for a full weather update for the next few days.
It's just gone 9 o'clock. I'm Dawn Neeson.
And I'm Cameron Walker, and this is GB News Breakfast. Tell you what, Dawn, it's been incredibly misty over the last few days.
A murk. I don't know if that's an official meteorological term, but it's just been a murk. It's just like a grey... bleh.
But also incredibly mild. Going on the Boxing Day walk or the Christmas Day walk, no scarf needed. I barely needed my coat, it was so warm, but incredibly misty. And driving back to London yesterday, I could hardly see on the motorway.
Very misty. Did you have your Christmas jumper on your walk?
I did, yes. And it says Happy Birthday Jesus on it. It's his birthday. He was born on Christmas Day.
Really?
Yeah. Happy. It's red. It's got snowflakes all over it, and it says Happy Birthday, Jesus.
That's quite nice.
Yeah, exactly. It still keeps the religious elements of the day.
Well, mine was semi-religious, my Christmas jumper. It was a present from the husband. It was a West Ham jumper.
Oh, nice. Was it Christmassy?
It's got snowmen on it, yeah, blowing bubbles. And, yeah, it's in claret and blue, which is not a very festive colour scheme.
Maybe not.
I did wear it to watch West Ham play Southampton, and wasn't the most exciting game, was it?
No.
But
it is odd, though. I mean, why on earth is it not cold? I want cold, crisp, frozen over ponds.
You know, we never get them. We never get them. We have this myth that we're going to have a Dickensian white Christmas, and it rarely happens.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
I mean, they say, like, if one snowflake falls, that's a white Christmas.
Not in my book, though.
No, but it's not. But, you know, the ones you see on the Christmas cards, just doesn't happen.
You need to go to Norway or Finland. I mean, it could be worse. You could be going to Australia and have 26 degrees on Bondi Beach in Sydney, as some people do.
Yeah, no, you're selling it. I'm there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all your comments about my chest as well, by the way, and all your cures, particularly liking, sorry, I've lost your name now, the one that suggested brandy. Good idea. Might be giving that a go.
I'll bring in some gin tomorrow. And maybe you can get some honey after the show.
I'm fussy, to be honest with you.
Anything. Gosh, although there has been a bit of a spat, hasn't there, online over the last 24 hours? Two leading politicians.
Yeah, this is a fresh row broken out between Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, it follows the party claiming to have surpassed the total number of Conservative Party members, according to a digital tracker.
But Kemi Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake and issuing misleading figures.
Well, this is what Nigel Farage had to say when we spoke to him a little bit earlier.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this rest. We are going to become the challengers of Labour. We are becoming the real opposition. They can say what they like. The Conservative brand is broken. So many broken promises, time and time again. People have had enough. They're looking for something fresh, new and honest.
Oh, I'm not going to let this rest, says Nigel Farage.
Fighting talk.
Indeed, watch this space. But a Conservative Party spokesperson has spoken to us this morning, and they say that Reform has delivered a Labour government that has cruelly cut winter fuel winter payments for 10 million pensioners, put the future of family farming and food security at risk, and launched a devastating raid on jobs, which will leave working people paying the price.
Well, maybe Kevin Bennett should be having a go at what Labour are doing rather than having a go at Nigel Farage then.
Maybe.
In any case, a vote for reform this coming May is a vote for a Labour council. Only the Conservatives can stop this.
Well, let's talk to the political editor of The Spectator, Katie Balls. Katie, welcome to you. Good morning. Nigel Farage has a lot of fighting talk this morning and suggests that he's not actually going to let this spat go.
Yes, and I think the very fact that Reform have been so active over the Christmas period, emails sent on Christmas Day saying, are you bored yet? You might be if you're reading this email, so why not join Reform? The fact they did a stunt lighting up the Conservative campaign headquarters and does give an indication that they're not really taking this as a period of rest. And I think now that there's a spat between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch on the figures, that's really riled the Reform team who say, well, we're being accused of something we haven't done. I think we're going to hear a lot more potentially today and definitely in the coming days as Reform try and make their case that the Conservatives are not on sturdy ground in their allegations.
Katie, we do know that Nigel Farage has a complete gift for creating headlines, very Donald Trump, if you like, in that sense. Do you think he's been a bit naughty here and deliberately pushed Kemi Badenoch's buttons to get this reaction, get more headlines, get more people joining Reform?
I'm not sure if he's been naughty, just in the sense that politics is politics and you're often trying to force your opponent into positions to antagonise them. And I think that's definitely what he's doing it. But, it is almost the sport of it. I think there are questions. Of course, Reform have come out and said the ticker is all legitimate, is linked to payments. We can back this up. We may get more on that. But you have had various points when they talked about their 100,000 member, and that member, depending on who you speak to, tends to be a different one. So I don't think there's always been a completely coherent message there. As for Kemi Badenoch, I think that she also is quite good at getting attention. It's one of the reasons the Tories picked her. So now it's very Kemi Badenoch to just come out fighting, but not necessarily put that much evidence in that tweet thread. And now we have two fighters in the ring and really seeing where it goes.
But in that tweet thread, Kemi Badenoch said that Conservatives have gained thousands of new members since she became leader, and says we're building quietly and steadily on principles and values, not gimmicks. So it sounds like Kemi's quietly confident.
It does. And one of the things when she was interviewed for the Spectator's Christmas special that she talked about was her desire to get more young members, saying you don't really have the fun unless you have the young. But I think she sees it as quite a long-term project. Now, if the membership has gone up a little bit for the Tories, that is good. But also the Tories in the past have always been really reluctant to give a running commentary or be particularly open about their numbers. And that's why, when it comes to party memberships, there's always a bit of scepticism just because there's not the transparency across the board that makes it easy to do these comparisons. There's also the point, of course, that if you look at party memberships, they don't always reflect the idea that you're about to take government. There are lots of members under Jeremy Corbyn. He did not make it to number 10. He failed twice in that effort. But I think it does certainly show where energy is if people are joining. And it therefore probably helps Nigel Farage at the moment in suggesting that Reform has momentum.
It's interesting you mentioned Jeremy Corbyn because Labour Party membership actually peaked under Jeremy Corbyn at 564,000. Since they've been in government, they have lost 37,000. And I'm a bit confused about what Kemi Badenoch is saying because the Tory membership, as far as we can work out, is the lowest on record.
Yes, I think what Kemi Badenoch's saying is that since she's taken over, it's going up slightly. But of course, as soon as you say that, you get into a situation Nigel Farage has put them in, where saying, well, why don't we both have an audit and make it all very clear? Which I think she might be reluctant to do because it sets yourself, unless the Conservatives suddenly want to be very transparent about their membership for a long period to come, it does set in motion something she might not want to happen. But I think there is a point, which is, what does this membership game tell us? High membership does not always correspond to success with the polling booth. But I think given Kemi Baden has now stepped into this fight, it's almost as she's accepting the premise that high membership is a good thing. And that means that I think we're heading to 2025 where there is, whether or not they do this audit, there's going to be a lot of competition when it comes to the number of members attending these party conferences, the number of members attending events, because both leaders have now clearly staked it as something which does show you how much enthusiasm there is for your brand.
A Conservative Party spokesperson, Casey, says the vote for reform this coming May in the local elections is a vote for a Labour council. How realistic is that charge or threat almost from the Conservative Party?
So I think it's a bit of a harder argument to make now, just in the sense that if you look at the general election result, if reform had not been there, I think you can argue Keir Starmer's majority would be smaller. Perhaps he would not be able to do some of the things he had done and so forth. But given reform have come second in the recent general election and lots of seats that Labour hold, it's now harder to say they are just a nuisance causing all these problems and just don't vote for them. There is an argument you can make in certain seats, not all of them, that reform are the main challenger to Labour. And that's why you increasingly hear some even in the Tory party talking about a possible pact at the next election, where there's lots of seats where the Tories, I think on paper, look like they're the main challenger to Labour. But what about those seats in the North East where reform is second? Of course, there's always a risk of splitting the vote on the right. It's just while reform maintain where they are in the polls and looking at if they can show they're building, particularly in the coming year in Wales, potentially next the year after in Scotland, you get to a situation where they have more of a stake to really claim in terms of where they're going than they did in the last general election. And that's a problem for Kemi Badenoch, which is why she really needs to use the next 6 months to show that she can lead the Conservative parties to a much better place than they currently are in, where they're currently stalling in the polls rather than really gaining ground.
Katie, just one final very quick question. I mean, both of these people potentially could be our next Prime Minister. Is a Twitter spat becoming of somebody who wants to hold that office?
It's not the most becoming thing. I think particularly on Boxing Day when lots of people are resting and, you know, a period of reflection often rather than a period of fighting online. But I suspect it is a taste of the year to come because 2025 is really going to be a lot of Farage versus Badenoch.
Oh, gosh.
Interesting times ahead. Thank you very much, Katie. That's Katie Balls, political editor of The Spectator there. It's going to be a feisty year if it's starting off like this.
Yes, it will certainly keep us on the toes, won't it? But at GB News, we love to hear what you think. And every day we're running a poll of the day. And today we're asking, do you agree with Nigel Farage that the Conservative brand is dying in Britain? The results so far, drum roll please, 91% say yes, it is. 9% of you, though, say it's not. And we'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day. Make sure you keep tuning in. Final results in Martin Daubney's show.
And for all our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll.
Now, ministers have been urged to move thousands of inmates into low-security open prisons to tackle the overcrowding crisis.
The suggestion comes from the former Conservative Justice Secretary David Gauke, who says the UK should follow Spain's approach whereby convicted criminals are free to work and study.
But would it actually work? Well, earlier we spoke to former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley.
And of what Mr. Gauke is saying, but
Oh, well, Peter, you could hear him a little bit then, but you got us again, I'm afraid.
Yes.
I mean, we spoke to Peter a lot, actually, about whether or not prison is a punishment in the 21st century. Is there the capacity for the open prisons? I believe we can now hear from Peter.
Yes.
This is what he said.
But a place in an open prison must be earned. And what I mean by that is a prisoner must previously have complied with the rules, the regulation, and everything that applies within the prison system. They must have confronted their offending, appreciate the harm that they've caused, and look to make reparation for that. And they must also have shown a willingness to leave their life of crime behind them, and they've earned the trust of the staff so they could leave an open prison every day, go to work, for example, go and volunteer with a charity, for example, and then return to the prison every night. If all of the aforementioned is complied with, then I believe it is a very useful step towards somebody's rehabilitation.
But it does seem to work very well in Spain, where 25% of prisoners are treated in this way, and in Norway, where a third are. But as Cameron said, we don't have the space, we don't have enough prisons in this country, as we know. And many of our open prisons, we have more people absconding than Spain and Norway do. What is it about criminals in this country that are different to Norway and Spain?
Yes, you're absolutely right. We do have a number of people that abscond from open prisons. It's not on an epidemic scale at all, but it is a number that has to be recognised. And in furtherance of that, many years ago, me and my team kept a man under surveillance who was at Ford Open Prison. He left that jail every day. The prison thought he was going to work. And in fact, as we followed him day after day after day, he went and met international drug smugglers and was plotting. And that's all culminated in a vessel in the dead of night sailing into Littlehampton loaded with many tons of drugs. And unfortunately for the bad guys, me and my team were lying in wait. So that really worked out very, very bad for that man who was in an open prison and was then charged with more serious offences and spent his life in jail. So it's not perfect. Another good thing, though, about open prisons is that they can be constructed fairly quickly and at a relatively low cost, because they do not require the security systems that a maximum security jail requires.
Interesting stuff. Well, what do you think about that? gbnews.com/your say. Are you a supporter of more open prisons? I mean, we know that in this country, some pretty hardcore criminals have ended up in an open prison and absconded.
Yeah.
There's a shock.
And then we saw the government being forced to release a number of prisoners earlier this year. And you see these horrible scenes of outside Wandsworth in particular, of them popping champagne corks and all the rest of it.
Picked up in sort of like sports cars and things. In any case, what has got people animated at the moment is not prisons, it's your Christmas jumper.
My Christmas jumper.
Yeah, which it said, what did it say?
It said, "Happy birthday, Jesus."
Right, OK, and I looked shocked, not because I didn't know that 25th of December celebrated the birth of Jesus Christ, although there is debate about whether he was actually born on that day. It was just the fact I'd never heard of a jumper like that. Yeah. My Christmas jumper's always really naff and normally involving a football club, well, West Ham.
Well, I thought it
actually really
kept
classy.
the religious message. It was red, it had snowflakes. What more do you want?
Yeah, well, exactly. But Jeffrey says, read your Bible. Jesus was not born on the 25th of the 12th.
Oh, OK. Well, I'll maybe get a picture for you tomorrow.
But, yeah, Gay Bilem says, I love Cameron. He really makes me laugh.
Oh, thank you, Gay.
Is that your friend?
No, yeah, boy, she can be now.
You are now, absolutely.
Absolutely.
In any case, if you didn't get one of those lovely Christmas jumpers that we both got, well, his was better than mine, or anything on your Christmas list this year, how about 50,000 in tax-free cash for the new year?
Yeah, it really could all be yours in our biggest ever Great British giveaway. Here's all the details of how you can enter.
There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Oh, good luck. What could you do with that in 2025? You could escape for some sun, couldn't you? Well, I mean, it has been a year of royal health scares, and we'll be looking back at the King's cancer diagnosis and everything else to do with the royals. That's next. This is GB News with Cameron and Dawn.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Well, drinkers have been warned about a drop in the quality of French wines after poor weather conditions hit this year's grape harvest. Winemakers across France will make 240 million fewer bottles of wine this year, the country's farming ministry said on Tuesday. So should we think of switching from French to English? I'm joined now by sommelier and founder of Inflorescence Wines, Jacinta Madison-Williams. Hello, Jacinta.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. First of all, let's just think about the poor French.
We should.
Has this been a fairly universal weather catastrophe for France?
It has. A kind of across the board, we're about 22% down on last year's crops, which is quite significant. I think it's like one of the 4 years over the last century that have been this low. So. And
it's affected both quality and quantity?
I would say more so quantity. There's always ways of counteracting quality. It depends if people are desperate to make wine. They can obviously push out more watered down grapes. There's been a lot of rain, if you hadn't noticed. Not only in France, we felt it here too. But lots of frost, supercell hailstorms have completely wiped out some crops. So in some cases, there's nothing to make. In other cases, it's just really watered down grapes and you want to pick earlier to make sure you're avoiding all those rains. But I would say more so it's quantity. But saying that, France is still the biggest producer of wine in the world. It might be taken over by Spain this year, but as a consumer, don't panic. We're not going to run out of wine. And we obviously have lots of lovely wine growing here now in England. So whether we do make a little jump for a bit to English wine, but there's definitely still lots out there.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Cameron and Dawn.
It's been a tough year now for royal family health-wise, is what I'm trying to say. And it's me, I'm afraid, because I've been taking a look back at the King's cancer diagnosis because my normal job is royal correspondent. Take a look.
His Majesty King Charles III has been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
2024, the year of royal health battles. In January, the King went into hospital for treatment on an enlarged prostate, which was benign. His Majesty spent 3 nights at the London clinic before being discharged for a private period of rest. King Charles was widely praised for being so open about his condition. Searches on the NHS websites for enlarged prostates skyrocketed, and it's understood the King was keen to share details of his diagnosis to encourage other men who may be experiencing symptoms to get checked. The following month, Buckingham Palace released an important statement explaining King Charles had been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
My thoughts are with him, and you know, to go through something like cancer but in the public eye is you know, pretty something.
Yeah, it's sad. You know, hopefully he can make a recovery.
It's a shame for the family more than anything. I think of the family like you would do your own family.
The King stepped back from public duties but continued working through his government red boxes. As winter rolled into spring, a glimmer of hope. Doctors gave him the green lights to attend a traditional Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel in Windsor. Previously advised to avoid large crowds, he greeted members of the public who had gathered.
We were trying to diagnose cancers earlier.
The King chose a Macmillan Cancer Centre in London for his first public engagement following his diagnosis, meeting fellow patients. From then on, the King ramped up his public appearances. Queen Camilla and the King's doctors struggled to persuade him to slow down, as the King was still continuing his weekly cycle of treatment. He persevered with several public engagements, but adaptations were made to keep the King well enough. He travelled in a carriage rather than on horseback during his Trooping the Colour birthday parade in June. By the autumn, the King was allowed to travel thousands of miles for a tour of Australia and attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa.
Let us choose within our Commonwealth family the language of community and respect, and reject the language of division.
New Zealand was originally on the cards too, but because of His Majesty's health, doctors advised him to skip the country, a decision taken in close consultation with the Kiwi government. The schedule on tour was gruelling, carrying out more than 30 engagements over 11 days. Despite this, the King appears to be enjoying himself, with the medical team never far away. Next year, royal sources confirmed the King plans to carry out a normal-looking overseas tour schedule. This is expected to include both a spring and autumn tour. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Lovely report there from a certain Cameron Walker, who's here with me. Well, that's it from us for today. Thank you so much for watching. We're back with breakfast again tomorrow, but coming up next is Britain's Newsroom with Ben Leo. It's got a very interesting tie, so don't go too far.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your Friday morning weather update for GB News provided by the Met Office. Misty and murky scenes to kick off this day for many of us. Whilst high pressure is in charge, it is trapping quite a lot of cloud underneath it to provide us with anticyclonic gloom. Some quite dense patches of mist and fog around first thing, so it is worth taking care if you're about to start travelling on the roads. Certainly some travel delays are possible in places. This cloud will be thick enough in places to also provide some outbreaks of drizzle, so quite damp for some of us as well. Much of this mist and fog could linger right throughout the day, so it is set to stay murky during a good portion of Friday. It's also going to feel quite cool underneath this cloud, particularly across southeastern areas. Temperatures of 6 degrees Celsius is now slightly below average for the time of year. But we might just squeeze into double digits for Northern Ireland, Northern England into southern central areas of Scotland as well. Best chance of some brightness, sunshine today, maybe around the Moray Firth into Aberdeenshire as well, but northwestern areas of Scotland are going to see outbreaks of rain, and these will steadily push their way southeastwards as we head throughout this evening and overnight. Behind that, there will be some slightly clearer spells moving their way into the far north of Scotland, so here there could be a touch of patchy frost in rural spots to kick off Saturday morning, but elsewhere underneath the cloud will be holding up around 4 to 8 degrees Celsius. We'll be watching as this rain band very slowly moves its way southwards on Saturday, and behind that we will again allow for some sunnier spells to emerge across parts of Scotland, maybe even into the far north of Northern Ireland for the afternoon. Blustery showers will move in behind that with gales around coastal areas, but for the bulk of England and Wales it's another very grey, dreary day again with some mist and fog around. Temperatures on the thermometer 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. It is worth noting into the new working week that we could see things turn notably unsettled, particularly across Scotland, so it's worth staying up to date with the forecast as we do head towards New Year. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services aren't running between Leeds and either Sheffield, Doncaster or Wakefield Kirkgate at the moment because of late finishing engineering works. The Port of Holyhead remains closed for repairs. In Cheshire, the A50 is closed off junction 20 of the M6 near Warrington after an accident yesterday morning. Train services are suspended between Birmingham New Street and both Stafford and Shrewsbury, and between Birmingham International and Telford Central because of a signalling problem. In London, Shaftesbury Avenue is closed for an investigation. Buses replaced trains between St Pancras Station in London, both Bedford and Harpenden because of engineering works, and there are also no trains running into and out of Paddington or Liverpool Street stations in London because of engineering works, and Eurotunnel are reporting delays of up to 2 hours for passengers at Folkestone. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Three incredible young people from Essex are planning to become the youngest people ever to row, not sail, row, across the Atlantic Ocean.
It's about for 3,000 miles?
It is.
Give or take.
Almost exactly that, Sam.
The three flying fish, so-called, consists of Anna, Dunk, Harry, Alan and Rowan Daly, who are preparing to row that 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. It would be the second largest ocean in the world. And the trio are aiming to do that challenge in support of the Teenage Cancer Trust.
Well, I'm very pleased to say that Anna and Harry from the Flying Fish join us now. Very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
I think the two of you are bonkers, but brilliant. Absolutely incredible what you're doing to raise money for Teenage Cancer Trust. Why did you want to do this?
So our third person, Rowan, his friend actually died. So when he was in secondary school, I believe, one of his peers passed away, and Teenage Cancer Trust supported them and their family a lot. So it was definitely the right charity. Yeah, it was.
Absolutely awful. So you wanted to do something to raise money for teenage cancer. Why rowing?
So my dad did it in 2021.
The trip, the Atlantic trip?
Yeah, he rowed it as a pair. Where we live in Essex, they actually build the boats there. So we used to cycle round there past the boatyard, and he got interested and actually did it. He was the first year after COVID. And one night, we all met in the Air Cadets, so one night after Air Cadets, Rowan actually dropped me off home and the boat was outside. We were obviously waiting to get it sold. And I think he was asking some questions, and we stood there at my porch and went, Rowan said, I reckon we could do that. And I was like, yeah, I reckon we could. And then we brought Harry on board, and that's kind of how it all came together.
If people are watching and they want to support you, do you have a
Yeah, we've got
GoFundMe page
social
yet?
media platforms at the Free Flying Fish. That's Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, and our GoFundMe links in all of the bios on there.
Fantastic.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good morning to you. It's 9:30 on Friday, the 27th of December. This is GB News, live across the United Kingdom. With me, Ben Leo. Are we witnessing a political earthquake? A war of words breaks out between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch as Reform overtakes the Conservatives in the number of members.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I am not going to let this rest.
Elsewhere, should more convicts be moved to open-air prisons? That's the suggestion of one former Justice Secretary who warns we've simply run out of space. And Northern Ireland secrets revealed. Unsealed documents show former Prime Minister Tony Blair attempted to amend a Gerry Adams statement on IRA disarmament. We'll be live from Stormont with all the details. And after what's been a difficult year health-wise for the royal family, we'll look back at King Charles' cancer diagnosis. And does this include you? New year, new job. New research suggests nearly 1 in 3 people are looking for a new career in 2025. Very good morning to you. Hope you're well and you had a lovely Christmas. Let me know what you've been up to over the holiday season. gbnews.com/yoursay. I'll share with you a very quick present I got, one of my favourites. It's a tie from my mother-in-law with, if you can see at the bottom, a picture of my 2 boys embroidered at the bottom there, just to let them know they're with me all the time. Also, New Year's resolutions. Have you got any? Are they a waste of time? Let me know. gbnews.com/yoursay. And the Christmas goodwill, it's run out, hasn't it, between Reform UK and the Conservatives, if it was ever there in the first place, to be frank. A massive row brewing over membership. Kemi Badenoch, what has she been up to? Has she thought through her latest row with Nigel Farage and co? Big 2 hours coming up, but first, the news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Ben, thank you. Good morning. It is 9:32. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB Newsroom. And we begin with some breaking news. And South Korea's parliament has voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo. The move was triggered by a short-lived period of martial law declared by Mr Han's predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol. Mr Han says he will step aside to avoid more chaos. Meanwhile, a fresh row has broken out between Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch. It follows the party claiming to have surpassed the total number of Conservative Party members, according to a digital tracker. But Kemi Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake and issuing misleading figures. Nigel Farage had this to say when we spoke to him a little bit earlier.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this rest. We are going to become the challengers of Labour. We are becoming the real opposition. They can say what they like. The Conservative brand is broken. So many broken promises, time and time again. People have had enough. They're looking for something fresh, new and honest.
Now, Russian air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan, killing 38 people, according to the Reuters news agency, or sources speaking to them. The plane has been diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes. A period of national rail disruption has begun today in efforts to allow for major engineering works, including for HS2. Meanwhile, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel. And Brits across the country have swapped the Boxing Day sails for the beach as they embrace the cold water for a festive swim. The tradition, which has gained popularity over the years, saw revellers of all ages taking to the sea in Teignmouth, Brighton and many other locations as well around the country. Looks very cold. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron Walker. I want to know if he's got a home to go to. He's such a hard-working young lad over this Christmas period. The news bulletins, breakfast, well done to you, Cameron. And good morning to you all at home. Hope you had a very Merry Christmas and you ate lots and drank lots and spent some good time with your friends and family. Just some quick messages on your side. Debbie, good morning to you. You said, Ben, are you wearing lipstick? No is the answer to that. Does it look like I am? I'll have to amend that if it does. And Lely, good morning. You say, hope you had a wonderful Christmas. I did indeed. I know when I was a lot younger, I used to look at uncles and grandparents and even parents in the living room at Christmas time. And they'd always be, now and then, as you probably know, asleep with their mouth open on the sofa halfway through the afternoon. I never understood why they did that, but now I'm fully in that camp. I was dozing off on the sofa many a time over the Christmas period. Big show coming up because there's this massive row brewing between Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. That follows, of course, Reform's claims that it now has more members than the Conservative Party. That's according to the digital tracker you can now see on your screens. However, Kemi Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake and accused Reform UK of issuing misleading figures. As you would expect, Nigel Farage, he has since hit back, accusing her of being bitter, upset and angry. And Nigel spoke to GB News Breakfast this morning. Here's what he had to say.
Congratulations, you have overtaken the Tory party, or have you?
Well, I mean, the idea that the leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition is accusing me of fraud is absolutely disgusting. She may be used to being in a party that lies to the British public. We are not. We put that digital tracker up a few days ago, showing every single person that goes online, gives us their postcode and pays us £25. Even since we went through that number yesterday morning, the numbers are rocketing. We're another 5,000 or 6,000 higher than we were. We went past the Conservative Party, and I know that Kemi Badenoch is well known for her aggression and for lashing out, but to accuse me of not understanding the digital age when I've got 5.5 million followers on social media and she's got fewer than 1/3 of 1,000,000, frankly, was a bit rich. I'm sorry, but, you know, the truth is there is a massive, as Cameron hinted a moment ago, the truth is there is a very big shift that is going on in British politics.
So, Nigel, what do you say to Kemi's allegation that it's a fake because of the back of the website, the coding on the back of the website or something has been ticking up the members artificially?
Well, she calls herself an engineer. Let me tell you, she's not even in the same league as our chairman, Zia Youssef, who has made vast amounts of money on tech and through digital media. And we have had our work confirmed by several independent sources overnight. If the Conservative Party want us to call in one of the big four auditors to check the validity of our numbers against The ballot papers that were sent out of the leadership contest, thousands of which went to lapsed Conservative members and those that had resigned earlier this year, I think if the truth came out, she'd be very, very embarrassed indeed. You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this rest.
OK, so what are you going to do, Nigel?
I will let you know in the next couple of days, but I will not let this rest. It's absolutely disgusting that she should accuse us of defrauding the British public. It is quite wrong in every way.
Are you implying that there's some sort of legal action maybe coming?
I haven't implied anything. I've just said I will let you know my course of action in the next couple of days, and I will prove that these members are not fake.
Intriguing. Have you heard anything back from Kemi or the Tory party about your invitation to get the figures audited?
Not a thing, and I don't suppose I will for a moment. They know as well as I do that many of those ballot papers they sent out last year were to lapsed members or those that had even sent in letters of resignation. Their membership figure, I would guess, is substantially lower than 131,000.
Nigel, a Conservative Party spokesperson has says that a vote for reform in this coming May's local elections is a vote for a Labour council. What do you say to that?
These are the last dyings and thrashings of a party that may have been around for a very long time, but right now the newest party in British politics has overtaken the oldest party in the Western world, and the only vote that'll be split is if they split our vote. We are now ahead of the Conservative Party geographically in more parts of the United Kingdom than they are. We are going to become the challengers of Labour. We are becoming the real opposition. They can say what they like. The Conservative brand is broken. So many broken promises, time and time again. People have had enough. They're looking for something fresh, new and honest.
Interesting. You just wonder why Kemi is picking these fights. First of all, she was banging on about sandwiches, and then she was talking about, I mean, she's tried to take on Keir Starmer about migration at PMQs a few weeks back. Why you do that when we all know the Conservatives' record on immigration, legal and illegal, I don't know. But let's talk to political commentator Benedict Spence now about this. Good morning, Benedict. Hope you had a good Christmas. Kemi's been made to look a little bit silly here, hasn't she? Bearing in mind that Zia Youssef, the Reform chairman, was very quick to post a screenshot of the Reform back end of their website, and it shows, indeed, if it is true, 134,000 members.
I think it speaks to still an element of naivety about Kemi Badenoch. I think that as much as she says that she's sort of taking her time when it comes to putting together a proper policy manifesto on things that people can judge the latest iteration of the Conservative Party and vote for them perhaps going forward, I think that it is of no little concern to them that Reform are doing as well as they are in the polls, that sort of election bounce does not seem to have dissipated. And she knows that it's going to be a really difficult 4-year slog in trying to reel Reform back in. Simply because people are that fed up with both Labour and the Conservatives that Reform can play, frankly, by a slightly different set of rules to the establishment parties. Kemi Badenoch is perhaps not, or was not, the best candidate of the final two in the Tory party leadership contest to take on Reform. This will not be news to her, actually, that she is not Robert Jenrick. She doesn't sort of speak to that base in the same way, and I think it's seen by a lot of Reform voters as part of, the establishment of the Conservative Party, if you like. There can't be a situation where both Reform and the Conservatives survive. There is no future in which both parties long-term survive, and one of them can get into government. So this is, I think, very existential for Kemi. And in lieu of policy, I think she's been drawn into a spat, which, of course, was prompted by Reform. They were the ones that went to Tory HQ and projected this onto the facade of the building. She's made the mistake of being, of taking the bait, so to speak, where it would have been a much more dignified thing, I think, just to ignore it and say, well, we'll get to that in good time.
Let's talk about the membership situation, though. Some people suggesting that membership doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you've got 100,000 members, 200,000 members, and they refer back to the likes of Jeremy Corbyn and Labour, who had a massive membership and still lost the election. How important is it that Reform has overtaken the Tories in terms of members?
I think it's a very salient point to compare it to Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, because, of course, on that basis alone, Labour were absolutely convinced that they were going to sweep into power, and it didn't happen. And within that, you can get rather a lot of groupthink. If you have sort of 100, 200,000 people all saying the same thing, you can kid yourself into thinking, well, this many people agree with us. Maybe the rest of the country does as well. I think the number of Reform voters only matters in that it reflects the level of dissatisfaction with the two major parties at the moment. Beyond that, it doesn't matter how big it is. What matters is more, I think, the sort of diverse breadth of backgrounds and opinions that the party draws in. Is it drawing in just disaffected former Tory voters? Are they coming from Labour as well? Is it perhaps able to sort of cross that north-south divide? Is it able to make inroads in the red wall? But the most important thing for Reform, if Reform is going to survive, because I know it's doing very well at the moment in the polls, but it is at a very delicate stage in its existence, is the quality of individuals that Reform is able to attract to work in the party, to be candidates, but also to work behind the scenes, to put together grassroots campaigns, legal teams, that sort of thing. That's, I think, what it matters. Now, if you've got that sort of a broad sway of popularity and appeal, it's more likely that you will attract more talented individuals to your cause. But the proof will be in the pudding. And as I say, we're still a few years away yet from finding out at the next general election how well Reform has actually done. I think that obviously that's something you can't measure, but I would hope that if these figures are accurate, as Yusuf certainly says they are, that is a reflection of the fact that actually Reform is able to appeal to a very broad church of people. Whereas, of course, in the past, with Nigel Farage's previous political parties, they've always been on a single issue. And whilst that's been very effective in getting his political agenda across, that has also been their downfall in hindering their ability to get into power.
And I guess they'd say, Benedict, we've been going for 2 years, Reform, 2 or 3 years. They've got 5 MPs already, and they have overtaken the Conservatives. So I guess on that front, that is a great achievement. And they do seem to have all the momentum at the moment.
It's difficult because on the one hand, yes, if you're sort of judging on historic metrics, yes, it is phenomenal success. At the same time, given how unpopular the Conservatives were, I actually think it wasn't enough. I think that they should have done better at the last general election. And I think the fact that they came second in, what was it, almost 100 seats, I think was the crux of the matter. Because in a lot of those seats, it was very close. It could have been significantly more. That is where you will need to see at the next
mostly
general
red wall seats as well.
From 5 to 100, yeah. It'll need to be turning from single digits to triple digits. Otherwise, I think you'd have to say that's not actually as good as it appears to be. I think that it's in a very interesting moment, a very delicate moment. It needs to keep going forward. It can't rest on its laurels.
OK, Benedict Spence, thanks very much. Yeah, indeed, I think they came, Reform, in the red wall seats, they came second in 89 of, I think it was 94 red wall seats, and some, a very small margin as well. Benedict, are you still with us? I know he's gone. Yeah. I was just going to say one last issue with this is the fact that Nigel Farage, is considering defamation and legal action against Kemi Badenoch. Are you still there, Benedict? Will he go through with this, do you think? Would we see Kemi apologising on social media?
It would be ironic, it would be amusing if he did that and he forced the leader of the Conservatives into a grovelling apology. And I tell you what, that would be a hell of a shot across the bows. I think it might be a bit beneath him to go after something so petty. But you know what? It would be a great humbler for Kemi Badenoch, the person who is supposed to be rebuilding the Tory brand, to have to do that so early on. Yeah. All I'd say with that, though, is if you lose Kemi Badenoch, and there's every chance that she will be dethroned as Tory leader before the next general election, the likelihood then is you get Robert Jenrick. And I think he's a much bigger threat to Reform than Kemi is.
OK, Benedict, thanks very much. Happy New Year to you. In response, a Conservative Party spokesperson has told GB News Reform has delivered a Labour government that has cruelly cut winter fuel payments for 10 million pensioners, put the future of family farming and food security at risk, and launched a devastating raid on jobs, which will leave working people paying the price. A vote for Reform, the Conservatives say, this coming May is a vote for a Labour council. Only the Conservatives can stop this. Let me know what you think about that. gbnews.com/your say. Still to come, are you comfortable with more convicts being moved to open-air prisons? We'll be discussing that later. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun and it's very, very cold today, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're hoping to escape the grey skies of the UK and seek some sunshine across Europe, then western parts are your best bet over the next few days. With high pressure in charge here, areas of Iberia, southern France and into Italy are going to see a good amount of brightness at the moment. In the east, though, we've got Storm Elena affecting parts of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey. This is bringing strong winds and heavy rain, and this will be continuing over the next few days to come as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Last orders at the bar, and I'm joined by Geordie Shore star Ricky Guanaccio. Have I said that right? Is that Italian?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Is Italian, your parents Italian?
Is it? Pronunciation was pretty much perfect.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, look, mate, Geordie Shore, I've never watched it, mate, so I do apologise about that. But I know these reality TV shows are making big stars out of the people, making you famous, making you loads of money. Is it worth it?
For me personally, yeah. It's been a hell of a career. Been a hell of a lot of fun doing it. Ups and downs, but first and foremost, money-wise, yeah.
That's good. So people stopping in the street, you being famous, wanting the autograph and all. How do you cope with that, Ricky?
Well, when we first started doing the show, I mean, we got our show off the back of Jersey Shore in America. We never expected the fame that we got, and being one of the biggest reality TV shows in the UK and now the world. It's in 150 odd countries worldwide. Wow. It's pretty crazy. It's when you're living in houses. I mean, for example, Geordie Shore and Love Island's probably the same as well. When you're living in villas and you're living in houses, the arguing side sort of plays on your mind. You've got to deal with all that. It's a hard place to be. It's a pressure cooker.
You're living in one of these villas, Ricky, or one of these houses. Do you ever wake up one morning and think, what am I doing here?
When I first started, yes. Yeah. Now, I love it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't mind all the, there's no emotion connecting me now with film, and it's kind of like I go in there, it's fun, or it's, it's dramatic, whatever it may be.
Have you ever worked behind a bar?
No.
No?
Yeah, for not a long period of time. My mum and dad had a...
Well, I can
definitely messed this one up.
Yeah, I can actually believe that you've never worked behind a bar.
Yeah, so my parents sacked us when I worked in the restaurant.
Well, obviously, I mean, you wouldn't get a job here with a pint like that, would you?
Do you want it?
No, mate, no.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Now, newly unsealed documents have revealed that the former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, tried to influence a statement on IRA disarmament made by Gerry Adams. Despite the former Sinn Féin leader's confirmation of peace and disarmament, the IRA later accused the government of breaching trust over a leaked letter. Let's discuss this further with our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Good morning, Doogie. What's this all about then? What's the latest, please?
Well, good morning, Ben. And yes, I love these unsealed documents because you were probably still at school at the time this was on. I, unfortunately, was right in the thick of it. And behind me here in Stormont in 2002, there was Land Rovers lining all around here because Sinn Féin, the political wing of the IRA, had been caught with documents, very sensitive documents that could have been used for targeting of prison officers and serving police officers, British police officers, by that organisation. Now, it collapsed the government here in Northern Ireland, and there was fierce talks between Tony Blair and the IRA trying to get them back into government, and he basically asked them three questions. Would they disarm or put their arms out of reach? Would they come back into government and would they give up terrorism? Now, Gerry Adams was making a speech to Sinn Féin, and it appears that Tony Blair then decided that he would offer him assistance in that. Now, if you look at that really in the round, there's many stuff has come out in these papers, but really this is the most horrifying one, because you had a sitting Prime Minister of Great Britain offering a terrorist organisation that had links with Hamas, Libya, etc., and he was offering them a way out. Now, that really brings us to another question of, at that time, what was happening inside the media, because the media at that stage of the game, Alistair Campbell very much changed things around, that all governments would have government departments that would talk to the media. In Northern Ireland was the Northern Ireland office. You have it with the Department of Health and so forth, and don't get to really drill down and ask those questions. And that has really gone on since then. And those offices decide who they're going to take in, who they're going to tell what to, and really that still plays out to this day and hits journalism and hits media very hard. So for me, it is that particular part that I take out of these documents that have been released.
Doogie, thank you very much. Happy New Year to you when it comes around. Appreciate your contributions. Right, still to come, we'll be getting more reaction to the news that Reform UK now has more members than the Conservative Party. First, though, here's your weather with Jonathan. This is Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your Friday morning weather update for GB News, provided by the Met Office. Misty and murky scenes to kick off this day for many of us. Whilst high pressure is in charge, it is trapping quite a lot of cloud underneath it to provide us with anticyclonic gloom. Some quite dense patches of mist and fog around first thing, so it is worth taking care if you're about to start travelling on the roads. Certainly some travel delays are possible in places. This cloud will be thick enough in places to also provide some outbreaks of drizzle, so quite damp for some of us as well. Much of this mist and fog could linger right throughout the day, so it is set to stay murky during a good portion of Friday. It's also going to feel quite cool underneath this cloud, particularly across southeastern areas. Temperatures of 6 degrees Celsius is now slightly below average for the time of year. But we might just squeeze into double digits for Northern Ireland, Northern England into southern central areas of Scotland as well. Best chance of some brightness, sunshine today, maybe around the Moray Firth into Aberdeenshire as well, but northwestern areas of Scotland are going to see outbreaks of rain, and these will steadily push their way southeastwards as we head throughout this evening and overnight. Behind that, there will be some slightly clearer spells moving their way into the far north of Scotland, so here there could be a touch of patchy frost in rural spots to kick off Saturday morning, but elsewhere underneath the cloud will be holding up around 4 to 8 degrees Celsius. We'll be watching as this rain band very slowly moves its way southwards on Saturday, and behind that we will again allow for some sunnier spells to emerge across parts of Scotland, maybe even into the far north of Northern Ireland for the afternoon. Blustery showers will move in behind that with gales around coastal areas, but for the bulk of England and Wales it's another very grey, dreary day again with some mist and fog around. Temperatures on the thermometer 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. It is worth noting into the new working week that we could see things turn notably unsettled, particularly across Scotland, so it's worth staying up to date with the forecast as we do head towards New Year. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services are suspended between Leeds and Sheffield, Doncaster and Wakefield Kirkgate because of late finishing engineering works. The Ox of Holyhead remains closed for repairs. In Cheshire, the A50 is closed off junction 20 of the M6 near Warrington after an accident yesterday morning. Train services are suspended between Birmingham New Street and both Stafford and Shrewsbury, and between Birmingham International and Telford Central because of a signalling problem. In Worcestershire, the A449 is blocked by an accident on Kidderminster Road at Cookley. In Warwickshire, the A425 is closed east of Leamington because of a burst water main. Buses replaced trains from Bedford and Harpenden into and out of St Pancras Station in London because of engineering works, and there are no trains running into and out of Paddington or Liverpool Street stations in London, also because of engineering work. And Eurotunnel report delays of up to 2 hours for passengers at Folkestone.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine getting the call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Friday the 27th of December. This is GB News, live across the United Kingdom with me, Ben Leo. Are we witnessing a political earthquake? A war of words breaks out between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch as Reform overtakes the Conservatives in the number of members.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this rest.
Should more convicts be moved to open prisons? That's a suggestion of one former Justice Secretary who warns we've simply run out of space. Northern Ireland secrets revealed. Unsealed documents show former Prime Minister Tony Blair attempted to amend a Gerry Adams statement on IRA disarmament. We'll be live from Stormont with all the details. And after what's been a difficult year health-wise for the royal family, we'll look back at King Charles' cancer diagnosis. And new year, new job. Research suggests nearly 1 in 3 people are looking for a new job or career in 2025. So, as we've just been hearing, no more Christmas goodwill between Reform UK and the Conservatives. Zia Youssef, the Reform UK chairman, threatening Tory MPs online last night that they need to get their lawyers ready if they don't retract statements accusing Reform of being fraudulent in their member numbers. 134,000 members Reform UK have now. We'll see how that develops. A big 2 hours coming up, including more of that big story. But first, your news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Ben, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. And we begin with some breaking news. And South Korea's parliament has voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo. The move was triggered by a short-lived period of martial law declared by Mr Han's predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol. Mr Han says he will step aside to avoid more chaos. Now, a fresh row has broken out, as you've been hearing, between the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch. It follows the party claiming to have surpassed the total number of Conservative Party members, according to a digital tracker. But Kemi Badenoch has slammed the announcement as fake and issuing misleading figures. Nigel Farage has spoken to GB News this morning, and this is what he said.
You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this rest. We are going to become the challengers of Labour. We are becoming the real opposition. They can say what they like. The Conservative brand is broken. So many broken promises, time and time again. People have had enough. They're looking for something fresh, new and honest.
Well, in response, a Conservative Party spokesperson has told GB News that Reform has delivered a Labour government and that only the Conservatives can stop this. Now, Russia air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed into Kazakhstan, killing 38 people, according to sources speaking to the Reuters news agency. The plane had been diverted from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes. And new this hour, 2 sailors have died on separate boats during a yacht race in Australia. Both of the sailors were taking part in the 720-mile-long Sydney to Hobart yacht race. The organiser, Rolex, has said the incidents are being dealt with by the water police, but that their thoughts are with the families and friends of those who've died. A period of national rail disruption has begun today in efforts to allow for major engineering works, including HS2. Meanwhile, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel today. And Brits across the country have swapped the Boxing Day sales for the beach as they embrace the cold water for a festive swim. The tradition, which has gained popularity over the years, saw revellers of all ages take part in the sea in Teignmouth, Brighton, other locations around the UK. It looks very, very cold indeed, rather than me. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. And it's not. We don't even need to wait until 2025 for a fresh round of political bangers in terms of the news cycle, because Kemi Badenoch, a fresh row with Reform UK, Zia Youssef last night, the Reform UK chairman, tweeting one former Tory MP that a full apology by noon tomorrow will need to be delivered before they have to engage lawyers. Nigel Farage, of course, you just heard in the bulletin, saying he wasn't going to let this rest, the allegations of fraud. And some of you asking on your sake, where is Kemi? Why hasn't she been on the airwaves this morning to give her side of the story? We have asked Kemi to appear this morning on GB News. We wait for her answer. If she is watching, Kemi, if you're watching, please come on. We'd love to have a chat with you and iron out your side of the argument. So this massive row between Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and Kemi is the only story really worth talking about this morning. It follows Reform's claims that it now has more members than the Conservative Party. That's according to the digital tracker you can now see on your screens. However, Kemi, last night, slammed the announcement as fake and accused Reform UK of misleading figures. As you would expect, Nigel Farage has since hit back, accusing her of being bitter, upset and angry. Let's talk to political commentator Benedict Spence now. Benedict, good morning. Your thoughts, please, on this row with Nigel Farage and Reform from Kemi. It seems like it's pretty needless and pointless. She went on to X last night, Twitter, saying that she was an engineer, she's good at computing, and seemed to revel in exposing some sort of fraudulent activity. But it now appears, after screenshots were uploaded from Zia Youssef, the Reform chairman, that they do indeed have 134,000 members and counting.
Yeah, I really hope that this whole, this is my background, XYZ, isn't going to turn into a sort of a Keir Starmer, my old man was a toolmaker thing, and that it's sort of wheeled out at every opportunity. I mean, that's going to get really tedious if so, especially seeing as Kemi Badenoch doesn't really seem to have many policies at the moment, so we might in fact be facing that. Look, it was a very foolish moment, I think, from Kemi Badenoch to indulge in this. She took the bait. It was, a bit of bait from Reform in beaming these figures onto Tory Party HQ or wherever else. It was in London, saying, look, this is how well we're doing, rubbing their faces in it. And she shouldn't have done it, actually. If she wants to be Prime Minister, which you would assume she does as she's the leader of the Conservative Party, I think that sort of thing is slightly beneath you, or at the very least, only respond in that way if you have some proof of what you're saying. And she doesn't actually appear to have done that. She's just tweeted out that Nigel Farage and his party leadership are misleading their members. And in doing so, what she's done is added fuel to the fire, drawing attention to the fact that Reform's numbers are doing very well at the moment. So I think it's a naive response from Kemi Badenoch, and as you've just sort of touched upon, it's given Farage and Reform plenty of ammunition to now keep this story going over the next couple of days to prove that she's out of touch and that they're doing very well.
Yeah, Benedict, what do you make of this talk of legal action? Because Zia Youssef was tweeting former Tory MPs last night who were talking about this. He said, get your lawyers ready if you don't apologise. Nigel this morning said he wasn't going to let it rest. He said accusations of fraud were very serious indeed, and he was considering his options. Would it be wise for Reform to maybe demand an apology from Kemi or else face the lawyers?
I think, it would, first of all, be very amusing for a lot of Reform supporters, I think, to see the leader of the Conservative Party sort of forced into a 180 turn and start grovelling and asking for forgiveness or issuing apologies or anything like that. That would be very funny and an awful look for Kemi Badenoch so soon into her time as Tory leader. That would be a sign of a real misstep and a real lack of judgment. However, I think it might be wise not to do that, simply for the fact is that I think Kemi Badenoch may not last till the next general election. I don't think she necessarily has the star power to overcome Reform, but it just so happens that the Tories do actually have somebody waiting in the wings in Robert Jenrick, who I think would speak a lot more to that base. And long term, these two parties can't coexist. One of them will have to end up eating the other one. And I think, if you're Reform right now, I think you want Kemi to be leader as long as you can possibly keep her there, because she will keep on not doing very well against you. She'll keep on hemorrhaging support. And you want as much time as possible to shore up that support. Whereas I think if the Tories were to do what they very often do, and that is be ruthless, get rid of this particular leader and replace her with, say, a Robert Jenrick, well, then I think everything's in play, because I think he speaks a lot more to their base, and I think he could do a better job of winning back a lot of those voters. So it might be very fun to take legal action against Kemi, maybe not the moment.
It would be very embarrassing for her if she had to go online and publicly apologise. It would be, goodness me, some event. Talking of eating, Benedict, you brought it up. I'm reluctant to talk about eating after the last couple of days, but who is going to eat who? The Conservatives, are they going to find some oomph and retake the momentum from Reform? Are Reform indeed going to eat, as you described, the Conservatives eventually?
This is a tricky one. The smart money would still be on the Conservatives. Simply for the staying power, for the institution that's there, and also, frankly, for the massive vested interests there are in the success and survival of that political party. If you were looking for the smarter option, that's still the smarter option. And I know that a lot of Reform voters will say that that's not true, but I'm sorry, there it is. Reform have, though, a very good opportunity, and they have the time and the platform now to put in place a much more professional outfit than they currently have, to get their views out there, to get a policy platform that they can be identified with beyond simply migration, because that's not enough. A single issue is not, in fact, enough, I think, to make a new political party.
But Benedict,
Farage has done that twice before, and they've not survived. He needs more than that.
Sorry to interject there, but I think Reform would argue that immigration probably is enough to be a number one sole issue, because the likes of Nigel Farage link it to everything. He'll say you can't get a GP appointment because of immigration. Your child struggles to get a school place because of immigration. The GDP per capita, your quality of life is going down because of immigration. They seem to point everything back to our open doors immigration policy.
Well, except that the immigration policy exists basically to massage the economic growth figures. That's the only reason, really, that it does exist, is to try to give the semblance that the economy is growing, which it hasn't. We need to be honest here. The British economy has been in recession for a really long time. Migration is simply the way by which they're able to massage that figures by going, but look, the pie is expanding even though the crust is getting thinner. Actually, a lot of this is down to things like planning. It's down to energy costs. And whilst this might sound unpopular, I think if Labour were able to solve that, if they were able to junk this mad net zero idea and actually get us affordable energy, and if they were able to cut through the red tape when it comes to building infrastructure and houses in this country, I think actually people would begin to care a little bit less about migration. It wouldn't go off the table completely. but I don't think it would be at the top. I think it's only at the top right now because Farage is a fantastic campaigner and is able to link it to so many other things. But I think most people understand it's the sclerotic state of the British state that is actually the main drag on everything else.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think immigration, that lots of people would argue, is the defining issue of, I'd probably say, the next couple of decades, the future of this country, the identity, what kind of country you want to leave for your children and grandchildren. Very interesting indeed. Benedict Spence, thank you very much. You'll be back with us in the next hour or so. Reform as well. They would say immigration, of course, isn't the only policy. They want to scrap net zero, of course, which many of you viewers at home would like to see. They want to introduce a 20k tax bracket. So obviously any money you earn up to £20,000 is tax-free. They want to turn the small boats back in the water, back into Australia as well. So, yeah, we'll see. A very interesting row. I'm just not sure why Kemi would choose on Boxing Day to pick that kind of fight. Likewise with Keir Starmer in the Commons a few weeks ago when at PMQs she was trying to have a go at him about immigration, bearing in mind the Tories' own record on immigration. It just doesn't seem to make sense. Anyway, we move on. Ministers have been urged to move thousands of inmates into low-security open prisons to tackle the overcrowding crisis. The suggestion comes from the former Conservative Justice Secretary, David Gauke, who says the UK should follow Spain's approach whereby convicted criminals are free to work and study. But would it work? So let's talk to retired prison governor and author Vanessa Frake about this. Good morning, Vanessa. Would this work? Some Brits would be watching this and listening to this thinking, hang on a minute, we've got convicted criminals, they've broken the law. Why should they be free to study and come and go as they please?
Well, look, I mean, this happens already. We have open jails. It's nothing new. But, you know, since some very high-profile prison escapes in 1966, we got the Mountbatten report. And Mountbatten said that all prisoners should be categorised based on their risk to the public, because at the end of the day, that is what a prison is for. It is to protect the public. So a Category D jail, which is an open prison, has specific risks that prisoners must be adhered to. So they've got to have 3 years left on their sentence, have a good prison risk management, have good sentence plans, be a low risk to the public, not be a foreign national who's got a deportation order, and be deemed as a low risk to security. Now, prisoners are categorised based on risk, not on reward, and certainly not on punishment. So I'm not sure what ministers think has been happening since 1966 in the Mountbatten report, but prisons do this on a daily basis. Every prisoner that comes in as a Category B, and they are risk assessed, and their category is awarded based on that.
Vanessa, what do you make of the argument that to free up prison space, we need prison spaces, of course, we should just deport the 10,000 foreign criminals currently serving time in our jails? I mean, that would surely solve the problem, would it not?
Well, look, Ben, I'd be the first to say, yeah, send them all home. Let them serve their sentence abroad. Absolutely. But the problem is that many countries refuse to have them. Many countries would just let them go. So unfortunately, some are stuck in limbo. We have the Human Rights Act where solicitors get involved and appeals are made on deportation. And really the only money that is made out of it is by solicitors who defend these people to the ends of the earth, on legal aid, I will add, to stay in this country. And that is the issue. If it was a question of putting them all on a plane and sending them home tomorrow, absolutely. But unfortunately, there's too much red tape. The Human Rights Act comes into force, and so do solicitors.
Yeah, but it's all right for countries to say, well, we don't want our people back. I mean, why is it always Britain that's lumbered with these wrong-uns, you know? Just going back to the actual concept of open prisons, there's one near me, but I can remember over the past decade at least many occasions where prisoners have absconded, gone back on the run. So is it always the case that just because they're in an open environment, a Cat C environment, that they're going to be safe, for example, to the public, or less likely to abscond?
Well, both of those are risk factors. You know, their risk to the public should they abscond. It is Cat D, not a Cat C. But the worrying point is that when prisoners are categorised, at the moment, the Cat B estate is so full that a lot of Cat Bs are being downgraded to Cat C spaces, when actually they probably don't meet the criteria. And my worry is that if those Cat Cs, who are really Cat Bs, are then downgraded to Cat Ds, that poses a risk, and that will have to be looked at quite closely. But also, you know, at the end of the day, you are going to have failures. Some prisoners can't cope in an open environment. They absolutely just cannot cope.
Why not? What's their issue with it?
Well, it's too much freedom. It's too easy to, you know, pretend to go out to work and they're not, and then abscond, you know, to get involved in crime on the outside, local to the area. You know, I worked at Lakshmere House. We had 200 prisoners, Cat D prisoners, and we sent out probably 180 every single day. We had very few absconds, but they have to be managed in the community when they're out working. You know, you have to do checks on them. Yeah. You have to make sure that they're where they're supposed to be.
OK, Vanessa Frake, thank you for your company this morning. Appreciate it. Happy New Year to you as well. Aside from prison places as well, there's a crisis with prison recruitment, prison officer recruitment. Nobody wants to do the job anymore. I've spoke to many down where I live in Sussex over the years, and they just say the working conditions, especially at the prisons they were at, were just absolutely terrible. And it's no love lost between prison officers and their employment. So crisis is on all front across the prison sector. Let us know what you think about that. gbnews.com/your say. Up next, we'll be going through today's papers with today's panel, Andy Williams and Kane Blackwell. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Back in a tick.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history. Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello, welcome back. Ben Leo with you on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. I'm joined now as well by the political commentators Andy Williams and Kane Blackwell to go through all of the day's papers. Good morning, you two.
Morning,
Good
Ben.
morning.
How were your Christmases?
Very good.
Yeah.
Very well. How was yours?
Santa bring you everything you wanted?
Indeed he did.
Andy?
Very fun and festive.
I was just asking, when do we stop saying a Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas? Because it is still technically Christmas as a religious holiday.
I think we go all the way through to a new year, make the most of it.
Yeah, I would agree. See, look, bit of common ground already.
Some consensus.
Somebody mentioned in my ear, to be diplomatic, let's say Happy Christmas until the 25th, and from then on say Happy Holidays. But
we never say Happy Holidays. No, we do not.
Let's start with this reform row. We've been covering it all morning, and it really is explosive. I was saying earlier, you know, Christmas goodwill, if there was any left, has completely evaporated between the Tories and Reform. Yeah. Kane, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as a member of the Conservative Party, you know, this is just another thing where you just sort of sigh. It's another thing where you're like, why are we having this argument, you know? I stood in the general election, so, you know, I'm a grassroots campaigner first and foremost, and I know the important work that our members do across the country. But the problem what Kemi needs to fix now, and, you know, she talks about being an engineer, the machine of the Conservative Party is broken. So we do need to fix that. And what she needs to do is actually be a bit of an introvert, look inside the party now. It's not about, you know, being, you know, outward looking. We actually need to look at the party, reform our systems, our ways of working, particularly the candidates department, which, you know, throughout the general election and throughout the leadership campaign as well, every single leadership contender talked about reform of the party, talked about reform of the candidate system. And these are the things that actually matter to members, and get them infused and engaged and get them out there. And it will bring people back. You know, I was part of the Conservative Democratic Organisation as well, and we really did campaign to make sure that, you know, democracy is at the heart of the Conservative Party, and actually that's going to differentiate ourselves from Reform, because, you know, Nigel is the figurehead, and, you know, it's sort of a bit of a one-man band, so we need to show that we're different.
Well, Andy, Reform would say that, you know, they are democratising the party. They now have 9,000 members. Yep. But some people have argued, do members really matter? They keep pointing back to the likes of Jeremy Corbyn and Labour. They had thousands of members, you know, probably 100,000.
I think it was 400,000 at the peak. It was a huge
and they still
movement,
lost,
and they still lost badly.
So does it matter, all of this?
I think it matters to some extent. It shows that there's more than just sort of passive popular support. There are 139,000 people who are actively putting their hand in their pocket every month and, you know, paying up to be members of Reform. So there's clearly a groundswell there. I think what this row shows, firstly, it exposes, well, not exposes, it shows again that Farage is just a really, really canny political operator. We all know that. But more than anything, what I think it shows that Kemi Badenoch is temperamentally ill-suited to be Conservative Party leader and to be a potential Prime Minister. She fell straight into this trap. You know, what she should have done when Farage did this sort of stunt, was it on Boxing Day, or, you know, we've lost track of time, haven't we, because it's Christmas, but she should have just risen above it and said, you know, Reform will do their thing, but my focus is on the Conservative Party and changing the Conservative Party. And instead, she just took the bait, hook, line and sinker, and now she looks silly.
Yeah, Kane, I've heard more from Kemi Badenoch about her rows and her dislike of sandwiches and banging on about Reform, talking about migration, than I have about actual policy from her.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's no point of talking about, you know, what our prospectus is for the next, you know, general election right now, because we don't know what's going to happen in, you know, the next 4 years. But
Kane, this isn't about policy.
No, I agree.
The problem is her personality and her temperament.
No, but
and I think what we've seen,
principles, and
she is so thin-skinned. That's the problem.
Look, what I would say is this, is what we need to be setting out now is the direction of travel. What do we want to do when we get back into government? Because that is the point. If the Conservative Party is anything, it has to be it has to be a party of government. And what's it going to do? Is it just going to govern, or is it going to fundamentally change the basis of this country? But the institutions, the NHS, all of these things that, you know, Reform has talked about, which others are talking about as well, and which many Conservatives want.
Kane, the problem is your party had 14 years to do that, and now they have a massive trust problem.
I don't disagree with you on that. That is my point. Like, we failed to change the system that Tony Blair, when he came in, brought in. He changed the face of our country, the fabric of society. Well, look, people disagree and people agree with it, but, you know, Conservatives worked in a system that didn't work for Conservatives and doesn't work for Conservatives.
But here's your fundamental problem, is that Reform, firstly, you have a far more charismatic, far better leader than the Conservatives have. That is a massive problem. And secondly, Reform claim to have very easy answers. Now, I don't think they do have easy answers. I think it's total snake oil. But they say, oh, immigration, yeah, we just turn back the boats, done.
Well, hang on, what's snake oil about it? Can you give me an example?
For reform?
Yeah, what
because
policy
I
do you
don't,
think
because
snake
if you look at the track record of the people who are in reform, if you look at Brexit, where during the, I don't want to relitigate Brexit, but throughout that campaign, a series of outright lies were told.
Such as?
To persuade, like the 350 million being
Well,
the
Andy,
classic.
we put more money than in the NHS than that, so it's nothing to do with money.
It would give us absolute control of our borders, and we've seen migration go through the roof. Now, you could argue that's the fault of the Brexit deal, but they unleashed that. You know, everything that's happened since 2016 was unleashed by Nigel Farage and this band of merry men of his.
Well, he's saying it's not his fault that the government in situ, the Conservatives, opened the borders to hundreds of thousands of legal migrants.
Well, that says maybe, but he should have accepted that was a risk.
And the NHS got even more than £350 million a week, far more than that.
I will say this, Nigel has always said there is a risk of us not having a perfect country. There's always a risk with Brexit, but the point is it is in our hands. It is up to us to make mistakes and to make good choices as well. And that's the point. So it's never about everything's going to be perfect after Brexit. It was always about us making the choices ourselves. So, look, I will agree, the Conservative Party didn't make some of the best choices in government. Do I think we could have done things a lot differently? Yes, I do. Do I think we need to change now? Yes. And Kemi has an opportunity. Kemi has an opportunity. She does have an opportunity to do that.
You sound like you're standing again, Kate.
Absolutely.
Oh,
which seat are you going to stand for? I'll pick you up on one point. You said when we get back in government. I mean, that's a bit self-righteous of you.
Well, I agree.
Is that not the problem with the Conservative Party? You have this divine right to rule.
Yes, it is.
I mean, you did it just then.
No, I agree. I agree. But it is the problem with the Conservative Party. It is the problem. The problem with the Conservative Party is, at the moment, it is failing to actually look at itself and say, what have we done wrong? What do we need to do to change, fundamentally change, and actually give hope to the people, the millions and millions of actual small-c Conservatives out there.
You're not hearing those answers from Kemi, and I totally understand.
I don't disagree at the moment.
I totally understand her point, which is, well, I can't come up with a general election manifesto 4 years out. That's perfectly sensible. But nobody knows sort of who she is, what she stands for. And I come back to the point, which is sometimes it's just about personality, and I think her personality is going to turn people off badly. And I think it's going to contrast particularly badly with Nigel Farage, unfortunately.
Well, also, Andy, just one more thing before we move on to a different story. Nigel never committed. That wasn't his slogan, the 350.
No, I accept that.
That was Boris and
that was a Vote Leave, which was a different group, but that was, you know, the Brexit campaign. Fundamentally, they were all on the same page. You've
got a story in the Times, Andy. A quarter of council tax revenue is spent on unjustifiably generous staff pensions. So nearly £1 in every £4 raised in council tax is being spent on public sector staff.
I just couldn't believe it when I saw this. So £7 billion a year is being spent on pensions for people who work for local authorities. It's a huge amount of money. It's the equivalent of putting 1p on income tax. You know, is a massive spend. And we all know that every year there's a 5% cap on council tax rises, and how much does it go up by? 5%, always goes up by exactly the cap. And I think we need to look really carefully now, with an ageing population and with a public spending bill that's out of control, should we be, you know, if you work for the civil service, you get a 27% pension. 27%.
Yeah.
Most private sector employees get about 5% from their employer. That's what I get. I mean, it's just, there is no justification for people who work for local authorities having 5 times the pension contribution of the average private sector employee.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, obviously, not all of these, you know, council workers are, you know, these big sort of executives. You know, a lot of them are refuse workers, of course, you know, youth workers, and, you know, they do a fantastic work and they should have proper pensions. But I don't disagree with you. I think the whole state in general is massively overbloated. We need to actually look at, you know, the public sector in a whole and actually see where we can reduce the waste, the stoppage time, you know, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But actually, it's only going to get worse under this Labour government because, you know, things like national insurance contribution increase, you know, that is going to be put on, like it always is, on the consumer, which in this case is the taxpayer.
Okay.
So it's going to get even worse.
OK. Kane, Andy, thank you very much. A new story this morning in the Mail. Labour have set up a new quango every week since their election victory. And separately in the Daily Telegraph, the premium paid to public sector workers has tripled this year after a string of generous deals by Sir Keir Starmer's government. So there we go. If you work in the public sector, you're sitting pretty for 2025.
Cut the quangos, cut the quangos, cut the quangos.
There
Done.
we go. You heard it here first. Andy, Kane, thank you very much. Let's get your news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Good morning, it's 10:31. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. And we begin with some breaking news. And the German president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, has dissolved Parliament to pave the way for a snap election on February the 23rd. It follows the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, losing a confidence vote earlier this month after weeks of infighting with his coalition partners on a 2025 budget and economic policy. And sticking with breaking news, South Korea's parliament has voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo. The move was triggered by a short-lived period of martial law declared by Mr. Han's predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol. Mr. Han says he will step down immediately to avoid chaos. Now, sources have told the Reuters news agency that the Russian air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan on Christmas Day, killing 38 people. The plane was diverting from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes when it crashed. Now, in the UK, a period of national rail disruption has begun today in efforts to allow for major engineering works, including HS2. Meanwhile, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel today. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. I've just been giggled by an email I've received from John. You said, Ben, why did you vote Green at the general election? Just to say, I didn't vote Green at the general election. I won't tell you who I did vote for. In fact, I didn't vote. There's your answer. But I did not vote Green at the general election. Coming up, Cameron Walker, he's a busy boy. He's got a special report on the King's health this year. That's coming up in just a tick. This is Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your Friday morning weather update for GB News provided by the Met Office. Misty and murky scenes to kick off this day for many of us. Whilst high pressure is in charge, it is trapping quite a lot of cloud underneath it to provide us with anticyclonic gloom. Some quite dense patches of mist and fog around first thing, so it is worth taking care if you're about to start travelling on the roads. Certainly some travel delays are possible in places. This cloud will be thick enough in places to also provide some outbreaks of drizzle, so quite damp for some of us as well. Much of this mist and fog could linger right throughout the day, so it is set to stay murky during a good portion of Friday. It's also going to feel quite cool underneath this cloud, particularly across southeastern areas. Temperatures of 6 degrees Celsius is now slightly below average for the time of year. But we might just squeeze into double digits for Northern Ireland, Northern England into southern central areas of Scotland as well. Best chance of some brightness, sunshine today, maybe around the Moray Firth into Aberdeenshire as well, but northwestern areas of Scotland are going to see outbreaks of rain, and these will steadily push their way southeastwards as we head throughout this evening and overnight. Behind that, there will be some slightly clearer spells moving their way into the far north of Scotland, so here there could be a touch of patchy frost in rural spots to kick off Saturday morning, but elsewhere underneath the cloud will be holding up around 4 to 8 degrees Celsius. We'll be watching as this rain band very slowly moves its way southwards on Saturday, and behind that we will again allow for some sunnier spells to emerge across parts of Scotland, maybe even into the far north of Northern Ireland for the afternoon. Blustery showers will move in behind that with gales around coastal areas, but for the bulk of England and Wales it's another very grey, dreary day again with some mist and fog around. Temperatures on the thermometer 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. It is worth noting into the new working week that we could see things turn notably unsettled, particularly across Scotland, so it's worth staying up to date with the forecast as we do head towards New Year. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. There are delays of up to an hour and a half with some cancelled trains between Leeds and both Sheffield and Doncaster. No service through Wakefield Kirkgate because of late finishing engineering works. The Port of Holyhead remains closed for repairs. In Cheshire, the A50 is closed E12 junction 20 of the M6 near Warrington after an accident yesterday morning. Train services are suspended between Birmingham New Street and both Stafford and Shrewsbury, and between Birmingham International and Telford Central because of a signalling problem. On the M11 in Cambridgeshire, the northbound exit at junction 14 A18 near Cambridge is closed because of a breakdown. Buses replaced trains between St Pancras Station in London and both Bedford and Harpenden because of engineering works. No trains running into and out of Paddington or Liverpool Street stations in London, and Eurotunnel report delays of up to 3 hours for passengers at Folkestone. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. It's been a tough year health-wise for the royal family. The King, of course, with his own problems, the Princess of Wales as well. GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker has been looking back at the King's cancer diagnosis.
His Majesty King Charles III has been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
2024, the year of royal health battles. In January, the King went into hospital for treatment on an enlarged prostate, which was benign. His Majesty spent 3 nights at the London clinic before being discharged for a private period of rest. King Charles was widely praised for being so open about his condition. Searches on the NHS websites for enlarged prostates skyrocketed, and it's understood the King was keen to share details of his diagnosis to encourage other men who may be experiencing symptoms to get checked. The following month, Buckingham Palace released an important statement explaining King Charles had been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
My thoughts are with him, and to go through something like cancer but in the public eye is pretty something.
Yeah, it's sad. Hopefully he can make a recovery.
It's a shame for the family more than anything. You've got to think of the family like you would do your own family.
The King stepped back from public duties but continued working through his government red boxes. As winter rolled into spring, a glimmer of hope. Doctors gave him the green light to attend the traditional Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel in Windsor. Previously advised to avoid large crowds, he greeted members of the public who had gathered.
We're trying to diagnose cancers earlier.
The King chose a Macmillan Cancer Centre in London for his first public engagement following his diagnosis, meeting fellow patients. From then on, the King ramped up his public appearances. Queen Camilla and the King's doctors struggled to persuade him to slow down, as the King was still continuing his weekly cycle of treatment. He persevered with several public engagements, but adaptations were made to keep the King well enough. He travelled in a carriage rather than on horseback during his Trooping the Colour birthday parade in June. By the autumn, the King was allowed to travel thousands of miles for a tour of Australia and attends the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa.
Let us choose within our Commonwealth family the language of community and respect, and reject the language of division.
New Zealand was originally on the cards too, but because of His Majesty's health, doctors advised him to skip the country, a decision taken in close consultation with the Kiwi government. The schedule on tour was gruelling, carrying out more than 30 engagements over 11 days. Despite this, the King appeared to be enjoying himself, with the medical team never far away. Next year, royal sources confirmed the King plans to carry out a normal-looking overseas tour schedule. This is expected to include both a spring and autumn tour. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Lovely, thank you, Cameron. Some of you suggesting on email this morning and on your say that you weren't too pleased with the King's speech on Christmas Day. John, you said, sorry, but the King's done it for me, mentioning the rioters during that speech, but not the plight of the British people's concerns over the vast amount of immigration coming into this country. Indeed, the King was praising multiculturalism in the UK, some accusing him of being completely out of touch with the concerns of everyday Brits on that front. Keep those comments coming in, gbnews.com/your say. On the flip side of that, of course, we wish the King very good health indeed, and it's good to see him back in action, likewise the Princess of Wales. Still to come, we'll return to the war of words between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here's the forecast for some top European holiday destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're hoping to escape the grey skies of the UK and seek some sunshine across Europe, then western parts are your best bet over the next few days. With high pressure in charge here, areas of Iberia, southern France and into Italy are going to see a good amount of brightness at the moment. In the east, though, we've got Storm Elena affecting parts of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey. This is bringing strong winds and heavy rain, and this will be continuing over the next few days to come as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
What? Oh, hello, welcome back. Next, are you one of 1 in 3 Brits who are looking for a new job in the new year? New year, new you, new job, new career? Maybe. We'll be discussing that next. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Phil Kearsey is bringing a new flavour to the Michelin-starred restaurant Pied à Terre as he becomes its new executive head chef. Customers can expect a menu that showcases modern British cooking accompanied by classical French roots, which uses hyper-seasonal ingredients. What are hyper-seasonal ingredients? That's an interesting phrase.
It's more about just reacting to the seasonality of everything. We like to change the menu all the time. So basically, I surround myself with the best suppliers, and they tell me what's amazing at the moment, and then we try and celebrate that in the restaurant in many different forms, using taste, texture and technique, and just try and celebrate something as humble as a broccoli stem or a cauliflower, using absolutely everything, and making sure we've got an ever-changing menu. So letting the seasons dictate, so it's never boring and we never get menu fatigue.
OK, your career has taken you around the world a bit.
Yeah.
For example, you were in the United States. What did you learn there?
So, well, every chef I've worked for, it's about to take something from. A lot of chefs will go places and just stay in one establishment and get to the top, and then that's it. I've kind of then went to another chef to learn completely different things. That's the brilliant thing, to be able to surround myself with such amazing chefs throughout my career, because I've learned different things from all of them. And you find out 5 different ways to do something, and you find the way that you like it the best. And it's also about understanding it takes a while to understand how the restaurant is, going through the history of all these amazing chefs that have been before me, the style, because it needs to make sense. You wouldn't have a dish that should be at the Fat Duck and then a dish that should be at the Waterside, you know. You need to make sure that it all makes sense and it goes together with the decor, the service, the wine serving. And so we want to be the restaurant, not that does a little bit of everything, we want to be the best French restaurant in London, you know.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 10:45. Ben Leo with you on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. Hope you're well and you've had a good Christmas and you're looking forward to the new year, whatever you're up to. Thank you for your emails this morning as well. Freddie talking about the King's speech, specifically on Christmas Day. You said the King isn't modernising the monarchy, he's wrecking it. Unless he becomes more like his mother and starts defending British values and British people, more and more people will start supporting a republic. Barbara, on the King still, you said, what about him mentioning the 3 little girls that lost their lives at Southport? Surely that should have been mentioned by the King. And Chris, you say the King is out of touch with British concerns about immigration. Of course, that comes off the back of King Charles praising the multiculturalism of Britain. And Debbie, separately, talking about this new research that 1 in 3 Brits plan to find a new job or a new career in the new year. You say, Ben, 1 in every 1 will be looking for somewhere else to live if this invasion keeps happening. Possibly. There is lots still to praise and celebrate Britain for, not least, I think, I would argue, the royal family. A good tradition, nice bit of class and history, which separates us from the rest of the world. Anyway, we move back to that research. 1 in 3 workers plan to find a new job or make a career change in the coming 12 months. That's a 12% increase on last year. And most of those planning to change jobs in 2025 cited better pay as their primary motivation for seeking a new job. They wouldn't be hard-pressed to go to the public sector, would they? There'd be massive pay rises, £14 billion from Keir Starmer if they're a train driver or a doctor. For more on this, I can now speak to the Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College London, Jonathan Portes. Jonathan, good morning. Merry Christmas to you, if it's still the right time to say that. Happy New Year. This is a massive uptick, isn't it? 12% on last year. What's got people thinking in this regard?
Well, as you say, the main motivation is people want to be paid more, and indeed they're right to do so, in the sense that the evidence is indeed that people who switch jobs do usually see a pay rise and experience on average higher pay growth than people who stay in the same job. So people are being entirely rational, and on the whole this is quite good news. In a dynamic labour market, people switch jobs quite a lot. In fact, the average young person, 1 in 4 young people do switch jobs every year. There is a lot of turnover in the UK labour market, and on the whole, that's a good thing. It lets people find jobs either that they're happier with, or that they get paid more, or hopefully both.
But what's the risk in that? Surely employers like seeing continuity, they like seeing loyalty. If you're trying to hire somebody who's had 10 jobs in the last 4 years, that's not a good look, surely.
That's absolutely right. I mean, there's a happy medium, and it depends on you yourself personally and what sort of job you're doing, what occupation. Obviously, but when you're relatively young, on the whole, it does pay both financially, but also in terms of long-term career prospects, to move around, because you're more likely to find something that suits you, that you're good at, and that you can progress in over time. So on the whole, I'd say to young people, yes, do consider your options, do look around, don't get stuck, do think about what might enhance not just your short-term pay, but your long-term career prospects.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm not too sure about that. I mean, look, I'm not an expert, but I think back to university leavers and people who have achieved this degree or that degree. They always want the perfect job in the industry they've studied in, or, they're surprised when they don't get 100k a year in the field that they've just spent 3 or 4 years studying for. When in actual fact, I think employers probably want experience in a lot of sectors over qualifications coming out of your ears. So should we be encouraging people to move jobs and wait until they find the perfect fit? Shouldn't we just get our heads down and graft and get some years under our belt and then potentially move on from there?
There's a balance. You don't want perfection, but equally, the idea that once you've studied at university or indeed wherever else, and that then what's going to be the right career for you, why would anybody at the age of 18 or 21 know for certain what they want? People shouldn't get stuck just because they thought that they wanted to be, a train driver, as you said, or a ballet dancer, or a GB News presenter. Maybe it's the right thing for them. Maybe it's not. Try it. If it works out, so much the better. But if not, there's no reason not to move on. And young people who do move on, not 10 times in 4 years, but 2 or 3 times, are probably more likely to find something that they'll stick with and do well in over the long run.
Is there any particular tips or advice that you'd have for young people, especially who are watching today, who are thinking, I think the grass might be greener on the other side? I mean, obviously, don't tell your employer about it, right, if you're actively searching for other jobs. But could you use job offers elsewhere as leverage for more pay in your current position?
You can, although I think that unless you're really being underpaid or exploited, in which case maybe you should just leave anyway, that there's a limit to doing that. It's not something which on the whole is going to promote your relationship with either with your employer or indeed with the person who's just offered you a job and who then discovers you've just been using them for leverage to get a better offer out of your current employer. I think that sort of game playing actually doesn't serve anybody, either you or your employers, very well. If you want another job and they're offering you a better deal, better money, whatever, take it. If not, then don't.
Yeah, I guess if you did do that, you'd know for sure how much you're valued. You know, I guess if you're willing to see it through, you call the employer's bluff and say, guys, I found a better job elsewhere, better prospects, crucially more money. I'd like to stay with you. I like the company. I enjoy my colleagues and the culture. But, you know, what can you do about it? I suppose that's one way of seeing how much value you're given by your employers. In terms of moving abroad for jobs, many people talking about moving to sunnier climes, the likes of Dubai, the Middle East, where tax is lower, etc. Have you seen an uptick in Brits, not just young Brits, but Brits generally doing that?
Surprisingly, we haven't actually seen that in the data yet. So immigration from the UK has been ticking along at roughly the same level, as far as we can tell, for most of the past 15, 20 years. It hasn't gone up or down very much. Now, of course, the immigration statistics are not completely reliable, so we can't be certain about that. But we see all this anecdotal evidence, and certainly there is evidence that doctors, junior doctors, for example, some are going to for higher salaries in Australia. And going back to what you said before about Keir Starmer paying doctors more, well, that's right. But look, the alternative is simply not having any doctors at all. So I don't think, you have to listen to some extent. For doctors in particular, you do have to listen to some extent to what the international labour market is telling us. If we don't pay junior doctors enough to retain them here, then some of them at least will go off to Australia, and that's probably going to cost us more in the long run.
Just lastly, very quickly, if you can, talking about train drivers, there was a report in the Times the other week saying that because the Labour government had given such massive pay rises to train drivers, they no longer wanted to do overtime over the very busy Christmas period. They were being offered £600-700 a shift, and they were saying, actually, we don't need that kind of money because we've just been given a pay rise and backdated pay. Was that a bit of a gaffe from the Labour government, do you think, on train drivers specifically?
I mean, I think there's, I'm not that familiar, but there's clearly some issues around exactly how contracts are structured. Because, one thing that clearly does not make sense is relying on voluntary overtime to fill essential services, right? Yeah. So I have no problem with train drivers being paid a decent salary for doing a very important job. Yeah. But we should have contracts that ensure if there's a service that needs to be run, we're not relying on people volunteering to do extra overtime to do it, but rather that's actually part of the contract.
OK. Jonathan Portes, you are the Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College London. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Still to come, has Kemi Badenoch picked the wrong fight with Nigel Farage as Reform overtakes the Conservatives in membership numbers? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel. Now, time for your weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your Friday morning weather update for GB News provided by the Met Office. Misty and murky scenes to kick off for this day for many of us. Whilst high pressure is in charge, it is trapping quite a lot of cloud underneath it to provide us with anticyclonic gloom. Some quite dense patches of mist and fog around first thing, so it is worth taking care if you're about to start travelling on the roads. Certainly some travel delays are possible in places. This cloud will be thick enough in places to also provide some outbreaks of drizzle, so quite damp for some of us as well. Much of this mist and fog could linger right throughout the day, so it is set to stay murky during a good portion of Friday. It's also going to feel quite cool underneath this cloud, particularly across southeastern areas. Temperatures of 6 degrees Celsius is now slightly below average for the time of year. But we might just squeeze into double digits for Northern Ireland, Northern England into southern central areas of Scotland as well. Best chance of some brightness, sunshine today, maybe around the Moray Firth into Aberdeenshire as well, but northwestern areas of Scotland are going to see outbreaks of rain, and these will steadily push their way southeastwards as we head throughout this evening and overnight. Behind that, there will be some slightly clearer spells moving their way into the far north of Scotland, so here there could be a touch of patchy frost in rural spots to kick off Saturday morning, but elsewhere underneath the cloud will be holding up around 4 to 8 degrees Celsius. We'll be watching as this rain band very slowly moves its way southwards on Saturday, and behind that we will again allow for some sunnier spells to emerge across parts of Scotland, maybe even into the far north of Northern Ireland for the afternoon. Blustery showers will move in behind that with gales around coastal areas, but for the bulk of England and Wales it's another very grey, dreary day again with some mist and fog around. Temperatures on the thermometer 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. It is worth noting into the new working week that we could see things turn notably unsettled, particularly across Scotland, so it's worth staying up to date with the forecast as we do head towards New Year. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting the call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
British 10-year-old has beaten Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein in an IQ test, would you believe? Genius Krish Arora got the maximum score of 162, which puts him in the top 1% globally.
Goodness me. Well, Krish's parents noticed his brilliant potential after learning he could read fluently by the age of 4.
Krish, how does it feel to be a child genius?
I feel really happy and privileged.
Aww. Do you see it as a gift that you have?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Nichelle, what do you make of your child being a genius? When did it become apparent to you that Krish had something different, something special?
I think at the age of 4, he was doing things that were way beyond and above his age.
Yeah.
He could read fluently and he could spell correctly, and he was doing complex decimal divisions. So we thought that he's on to something. I think there's a spark out here.
Wow. And how are you reading books, Krish? Did you just pick them up from your mum and dad's bookshelf and just start reading to yourself?
We used to go to the library and we got books.
Such a good tip. Such a good tip as parents.
Yeah.
Head to the library, take your kids to the library.
So, Nichelle, can Krish just do it all? Is he just an all-rounder genius? Every subject, every talent, he can do it all?
Absolutely, and he helps out the family as well. He's been teaching me grade 1 piano, and he hopes, and I repeat, he hopes that I'm going to complete it in 12 months' time. And he also helps out Mum, because when Mum is teaching his sister, Mum sometimes says, Krish, go solve that problem and, help your sister out. So, yes, he can do it all.
Krish, you're a superstar.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock on Friday the 27th of December. This is GB News, live across the UK, and you're watching Britain's Newsroom with me, Ben Leo. Are we witnessing a political earthquake? A war of words breaks out between Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch as Reform overtakes the Conservatives in the number of members.
I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this rest.
So much for Christmas goodwill. Elsewhere, should more convicts be moved to open prisons? That's the suggestion of one former Justice Secretary who warns we've simply run out of space. Northern Ireland secrets revealed. Unsealed documents reveal former Prime Minister Tony Blair attempted to amend a Gerry Adams statement on IRA disarmament. We'll be live from Stormont with all the details. And make sure you're buckling up this Christmas as parents are warned over the dangers of not wearing a seatbelt in vehicles. And after what's been a difficult year health-wise for the royal family, we look back at King Charles's cancer diagnosis. Morning to you. Hope you're well and you've had a very pleasant Christmas. Lots of you getting in touch on King Charles' Christmas Day speech where he was promoting the idea of multiculturalism. Some of you saying he was completely out of touch with the concerns of everyday Brits, not least on immigration. Keep those emails coming in. I'll get through them in just a tick. gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. And we begin with some breaking news. And the Metropolitan Police say that they have charged a man with 4 counts of attempted murder after 4 pedestrians were hit by a car in London's West End on Christmas Day. We will bring you more on that breaking news as we get it. And in some more breaking news in the last hour or so, the German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier has dissolved Parliament to pave the way for a snap election on February the 23rd. It follows the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz losing a confidence vote earlier this month after weeks of infighting with his coalition partners on a 2025 budget and economic policy. Now, South Korea's parliament has voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo. The move was triggered by a short-lived period of martial law declared by Mr. Han's predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol. Mr. Han says he will step aside to avoid more chaos. Now, Russian air defences were responsible for the downing of Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed on Christmas Day in Kazakhstan, killing 38 people. That's according to sources speaking to the Reuters news agency. The plane had been diverted from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes. Now, back in the UK, and a period of national rail disruption has begun today in efforts to allow for major engineering works to take place, including on HS2. Meanwhile, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel. Now, homeless shelters and food banks will receive surplus food from farmers as part of a £15 million initiative set to be launched by the government next year. The government currently estimates that around 330,000 tonnes of edible food a year is wasted. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron, and hello and good morning to you at home. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK with me, Ben Leo, this morning, all on my own. So I'm very much appreciating your say comments and emails. How was your Christmas, by the way? I hope you had a good time. I'm pretty sick of all the food, to be honest, over the past couple of days. And I said at the top of the show, I remember when I was much younger and I'd look around the living room during Christmas and see granddads or uncles snoozing away with their mouth open. And I used to think, why would you be sleeping on Christmas Day on an occasion like this? But I myself now was victim of that. I was happy to have a snooze or two during the festivities, so I completely sympathise with their plight. Carolina, good morning. You said, Ben, Merry Christmas. I'm sick of the King. Why mention the riots when nothing was mentioned about how the British people feel and are struggling to cope? So out of touch. Time for King Charles and Starmer, you say, to go. Micah, you say Charles is on record of saying that he doesn't want to be a defender of the faith, but defender of faith, of all faiths, in fact, and he can't be trusted to defend Christianity. Jonathan, good morning to you. You say I'm heartened that I'm not alone in depreciating His Majesty's Christmas message. I'm a 100% royalist and love our King. However, I didn't enjoy the second half of His Majesty's speech, which jumps on the woke bandwagon, extolling the virtues of surrendering our heritage and culture in favour of some multicultural hodgepodge. And Lindsay, you say, good morning, I'm sick and tired of being told by our betters that multiculturalism has been wonderful for our country. We've never been asked to vote on it, apart from a half-hearted Brexit referendum, which neither of the two main parties had any real intention of implementing. And there is one pro-King Charles comment in there from Elaine. Good morning, Elaine. You say, I think the King's Christmas speech was really nice, pointing out issues but trying to bring people together. So there we go, keep those coming in. Right, the big story of the day. A fresh row has broken out between Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch. It follows Reform's claims that it now has more members than the Conservative Party. That's according to the digital tracker you can now see on your screens. I think as of this morning, there we are, 139,000 members. However, Kemi Badenoch last night slammed the announcement as fake and accused Reform UK of issuing misleading figures. As you would expect, Nigel has since hit back, accusing her of being bitter, upset and angry. Nigel Farage spoke to GB News Breakfast this morning. Here's what he had to say.
Congratulations, you have overtaken the Tory party, or have you?
Well, I mean, the idea that the leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition is accusing me of fraud is absolutely disgusting. She may be used to being in a party that lies to the British public. We are not. We put that digital tracker up a few days ago, showing every single person that goes online, gives us their postcode and pays us £25. Even since we went through that number yesterday morning, the numbers are rocketing. We're another 5,000 or 6,000 higher than we were. We went past the Conservative Party, and I know that Kemi Badenoch is well known for her aggression and for lashing out, but to accuse me of not understanding the digital age when I've got 5.5 million followers on social media and she's got fewer than a third of a million, frankly, was a bit rich. I'm sorry, but, you know, the truth is there is a massive, as Cameron hinted a moment ago, the truth is there is a very big shift that is going on in British politics.
So, Nigel, what do you say to Kemi's allegation that it's a fake because of the back of the website, the coding on the back of the website or something has been ticking up the members artificially?
Well, she calls herself an engineer. Let me tell you, she's not even in the same league as our chairman, Zia Youssef, who has made vast amounts of money on tech and through digital media. And we have had our work confirmed by several independent sources overnight. If the Conservative Party want us to call in one of the big four auditors to check the validity of our numbers against the ballot papers that were sent out in the leadership contest, thousands of which went to lapsed Conservative members and those that had resigned earlier this year, I think if the truth came out, she'd be very, very embarrassed indeed. You know, I don't mind all sorts of comments being made about me, but to be accused by her of being a fraudster, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let this rest.
OK, so what are you going to do, Nigel?
I will let you know in the next couple of days, but I will not let this rest. It's absolutely disgusting that she should accuse us of defrauding the British public. It is quite wrong in every way.
Are you implying that there's some sort of legal action maybe coming?
I haven't implied anything. I've just said I will let you know my course of action in the next couple of days, and I will prove that these members are not fake.
Intriguing. Have you heard anything back from Kemi or the Tory party about your invitation to get the figures audited?
Not a thing. I don't suppose I will for a moment. They know as well as I do that many of those ballot papers they sent out last year were to lapsed members or those that had even sent in letters of resignation. Their membership figure, I would guess, is substantially lower than 131,000.
Nigel, a Conservative Party spokesperson has said that a vote for reform in this coming May's local elections is a vote for a Labour council. What do you say to that?
These are the last dyings and thrashings of a party that may have been around for a very long time, but right now the newest party in British politics has overtaken the oldest party in the Western world, and the only vote that'll be split is if they split our vote. We are now ahead of the Conservative Party geographically in more parts of the United Kingdom than they are. We are going to become the challengers of Labour. We are becoming the real opposition. They can say what they like. The Conservative brand is broken. So many broken promises, time and time again. People have had enough. They're looking for something fresh, new and honest.
Right, well, there you go. So much for the Christmas goodwill. Absolutely run out. Nothing left of it between the Tories and Reform. I'm joined now by former Labour MP Simon Danczuk in the studio. Good morning, Simon. Just for clarity, you were a Reform candidate in Rochdale. You are now a Reform member.
Absolutely.
What do you make of Nigel there asked about the legal ramifications? Lots of people suggesting, including Aaron Banks, by the way, the former UKIP donor, Brexit Party donor, that they should pursue defamation charges against Kemi Badenoch for accusing Nigel of being fraudulent. Also, by the way, just to add, Zia Youssef, your party chairman, discussing with a former Tory MP last night, he said take this tweet down and apologise or get a lawyer ready. Is this the route now that Reform and Nigel should take?
Well, it's certainly being escalated. I can't understand Kemi's actions here at all. It's quite bizarre. The first thing to say is we should celebrate people getting involved in politics and joining political parties. These are mainstream political parties. We should celebrate more people getting involved. So why she's taken this tack, I do not know. It makes her look very unstatesmanlike. It's strange behaviour. If she'd been that concerned about this being an issue, and if she was so confident that the figures were had been fiddled in some way, then surely why not get your chairman to come out and challenge it rather than doing it herself? Now she has to come up with the evidence. I mean, she's created a real problem for herself. If she doesn't come up with the evidence, she's in a really bad political situation.
Yeah, Zia Youssef last night posted a screenshot of your website's back end, which showed at the time 134,000 members. Of course, a screenshot doesn't prove much, but do you think Kemi now and the Tories should take up Nigel's offer of that audit from a Big Four auditing company, or just simply apologise, get it over with? I mean, where does Kemi go from there?
They've got to do one or the other, haven't they? They either take up the offer of having the figures audited both in the Conservative Party and in Reform, or she has to apologise, or she has to come up with the evidence that resulted in her doing the post that she did. But, you know, the bigger point here is that these figures are really symbolic of what's going on in British politics. There's no doubt about that. I've been in politics 35 years and never seen anything quite like this. It's not so much that membership is important. We've seen parties with much bigger membership numbers, but it shows that there's a revolution going on. People feel very strongly about the two mainstream parties, Labour and the Conservatives.
Yeah.
They're struggling, Reform's coming to the fore, and this is a symbol of it.
Well, yeah, you've just alluded to that, saying, you know, membership numbers don't mean electoral seats, and that is the argument overnight. They point to Jeremy Corbyn, who had 400,000 new Labour members join, but indeed he lost the election. So if it's not going to win you seats in Parliament, I guess what's the point?
Well, it shows that more people are coming to Reform, and these will become activists. A good proportion of them will start knocking on doors for Reform in constituencies right across the country, and it's that ground warfare that helps win elections. So we didn't have that so much in the last election, but look how many people voted for Reform. With more activists on the ground, the numbers are going to be completely different. Reform, I do believe, and I wouldn't have said this 6 months ago, are in for a real opportunity to win government at the next general election.
So your first big task, you'll probably agree with me, is in May at the local council elections. Nigel's been very vocal about it, saying this is the first opportunity. What happens in May if the results aren't as hoped for, aren't as you know, there's been massive conjecture and a narrative that you're going to be taking loads of councils, or at least council seats all across the country. What happens if that's goes to pass without much of a whimper?
Well, I think they will take seats. They've already been winning by-elections. We won, Reform won in Kent, a by-election in Kent, overtook the Conservatives and Labour just a couple of weeks ago. The added complication here is that the Labour government are proposing to change local government structures.
They want to cancel the elections.
And want to cancel the elections. And you've got Conservative councils, Kent and Essex, etc., wanting to collude with Labour to not let the county elections go forward. That would be an absolute travesty. But if they do go forward, I'm confident Reform will win a good number of seats.
OK, Simon, let me ask you this. Everything's going swimmingly for Reform. The polls are great. You've won a few by-elections. You've got, you know, massive amounts of members. You've overtaken the Tories. What are the risks for Reform going forward?
Oh, well, British politics is a tough game, isn't it, as we've seen on Boxing Day with the two leaders arguing. But the key for Reform is to have their candidates in place in good time, so they have a good lead into an election and they can do the groundwork, and then really identifying the vote. That's why Labour do so well, and I've been in the Labour Party. It's because they've got the data. They know where Labour voters live, and that data is crucially important in terms of getting your vote out. So Reform have to get into a similar position, and they've got limited time to do that.
Yeah, what was the stat, I think, in the Red Wall seats at the election of the 92 92 or so that Labour won, Reform were second in 89 of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah, absolutely. But more interesting, there's a number of three-way splits where Reform might be in third place, but in actual fact could easily leapfrog the Conservatives and take Labour. One thing's for sure, a lot of Labour MPs are going to lose their seats. They are in free fall. Things can only get worse as well. I mean, the economy's in a bad state. As we're going to 2025, Labour in a desperately bad position.
Talking of your time at Reform, you stood in Rochdale, of course.
Yeah.
Infamously, you suffered a bit of trouble up there. You had death threats even.
Yeah.
Can you explain any more about what happens there? And also, you weren't invited to the hustings, were you?
No, that's right. I mean, Galloway had it stitched up in terms of the Asian Muslim vote in Rochdale, and that's why he managed to win the by-election. He and his group, or certainly a group around him, kept me away from the hustings. But more significantly, halfway through the campaign, I received death threats, which are still being investigated by Greater Manchester Police, and I'm waiting for a conclusion from the Crown Prosecution Service. But that wasn't all the intimidation. There was lots of other intimidation as well. It was quite a rough by-election by British standards.
OK, I mean, that sounds pretty horrific. That said, why would anybody risk running to be an MP these days, not least a Reform MP, where you're going to get some heat, you're going to get some stick?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, the vast majority of people who do go or try and go into Parliament want to provide public service, and I feel strongly about that, as many other people do, right across the political spectrum. It's important.
OK. Just lastly, Simon, what was it like standing for Reform, the machine behind it? Is Reform as a party organised and competent? Did you feel like you were in safe hands?
They'd just been fighting two by-elections in Wellingborough and elsewhere, so they were stretched. But they're developing as a party all the time, and with the resources that they're attracting from donors, etc., they'll become a strong fighting force. I'm no doubt about that.
Are you standing again?
I haven't made a conversation with my wife.
Oh, with your wife?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say Nigel Farage.
No, she was shocked by the death threats in Rochdale, and she's Rwandan, you may know, and so if you get a death threat in Rwanda, it means something completely serious. So she's took it very seriously, and it has made us think twice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, sorry to hear you went through that, mate. And yeah, let us know what you choose to do.
Cheers.
Simon Danczyk, thank you very much, former Labour MP and Reform Party member. In response, I have to give you this: the Conservative Party response. A spokesperson has told GB News this morning Reform has delivered a Labour government that has cruelly cut winter fuel payments for 10 million pensioners, put the future of family farming and food security at risk, and launched a devastating raid on jobs which will leave working people paying the price. A vote for Reform this coming May is a vote for a Labour council. Only the Conservatives can stop this. That's their statement this morning. And just to add, by the way, we did ask Kemi Badenoch this morning to come on the show, albeit my show today, breakfast, maybe one later on. We haven't heard back from Kemi or the Conservatives just yet, but the invitation is still there. If anyone from CCHQ is watching, Kemi, if you're watching, good morning to you, Merry Christmas. You are welcome on the show. It'd be great to hear your side of things. Up next, we're going to be getting stuck into a look back at the King's health woes this year from our very own Cameron Walker, and indeed the latest stories of the day in our news review. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Her name is synonymous with fashion. Karen Millen, the high street designer whose dresses have been worn by some of the world's most famous women, including the Princess of Wales.
Yes, but in a recent Daily Mail interview conducted by our showbiz juggernaut, as I call her, Steph Tetchy, 63-year-old Karen confessed she isn't immune from worries about her appearance.
Well, this summer, Karen took the plunge with a £35,000 facelift using the very latest surgical techniques. Now, to hear more of her story, we're delighted to be joined by Karen herself and consultant plastic surgeon Dr. Tunj Tiryaki, co-founder of the London Regenerative Institute. So, how did you two get together?
That was a meeting at the Parliament, wasn't it?
It was, actually, yeah, through mutual friends, really.
So you already knew of Tunç and you knew his expertise. How did you come to the decision to kind of go ahead with this? I was reading the Mail article and apparently one day you looked in the mirror, and I've heard this story so many times before,
I know,
from not least my mum and my nan, and they said they looked in the mirror and thought, goodness me.
I know. I think it's that menopausal thing when suddenly things just change. And, yeah, for me, it was coming out of lockdown almost, where I was probably on the back end of menopause, and I just, like, suddenly looked in the mirror and it was like, oh, my God, what's happened to me?
Because I guess you still, I mean, for me, I'm 35, I still feel like a 20-year-old or even an 18-year-old. Does that change as you get into sort of your...
Unfortunately not, right?
Well, it does change to a certain extent, but, you know, I've always looked after myself, so I've always kept fit and looked after my skin. So, you know, it did come as a bit of a shock. I mean, I know, obviously, ageing happens to us all and we have to embrace that, but there's a certain amount that we have to put up with and then, you know, other things can step in.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 11:22. Ben Leo with you by myself today on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. I'm also joined by the political commentators Andy Williams and Kane Blackwell. Good morning to you both. Welcome back.
Morning.
I've asked already how your Christmases were. Did you get any good presents?
I did. I got some. I got a new tracksuit.
Oh,
some new shoes.
Well, that's giving you the inspiration now to get moving in the new year.
Exactly. What are you trying to say, Ben?
I don't know. Nothing. Sorry, that sounded bad. I didn't mean to be so rude to you. Andy, any good presents?
I'm going to hit the shops with my partner on Monday because I need to completely overhaul my wardrobe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, going to go for it, hit the sales.
I had an idea before Christmas. We were talking about the people spending money on presents, how much do you spend and so on. And I suggested maybe just not buying presents before Christmas and instead going to the sales, the Boxing Day sales,
my mum's
January
like that.
sales. You'd save a fortune.
She'd rather just, like she said, just give me the money and I'll go on the sales.
But then I was rightly put in my place and somebody said, well, what happens when the kids wake up on Christmas morning?
Well, there is that. There is that.
Yeah, humbug. I will show you. My mother-in-law got me this nice tie with a picture of my two boys embroidered down the bottom of it. Can you see that?
That's very cute.
Camera one, where are we? This way. There we go. On the reverse. So, always with me, close to my heart. Anyway, let's get stuck into the serious stuff. Kane, calls to increase the use of open prisons to reduce the use of reoffending. So, former Justice Secretary David Gauke has called on the government to make better use of open prisons to tackle the overcrowding crisis. Good idea?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but I think the point is about prisons is prisons have to be about punishment, but they also have to be about rehabilitation. There's no point of going to prison if you're not going to be punished for your crime, but also to be rehabilitated back into society. We have to do both. They have to be symbiotic. But I think what the main problem is with prison is the fact that prison officers, particularly, are not given the same level of respect, parity, as, you know, other emergency service workers, like police officers, emergency service workers. I think they really should be...
Prison officers?
Yeah, prison officers. And I think what we need to do is do much more to retain and train them, to give them actually a bit more parity with, you know, other really important key workers. Because, you know, we've seen, you know, and it was the Conservative government who's done it, you know, cuts to prison officers.
So how would that tackle overcrowding?
Well, I think that the point is it's about actually having trained officers in prison so that you're actually working with people to help them not to reoffend, you know, actually getting them back into society a lot quicker. So, and the massive problem is with people being in prison is reoffending. You know, that reoffending rates are through the roof. So that's what we really need to
Andy,
tackle.
we could just... this government bang on about overcrowding and prisons are full. Why don't you just deport the 10,000 foreign criminals currently languishing in our jails at taxpayer expense?
Well, I think that's easier said than done. I think that's the...
Why is it just put them on a plane and go home?
Well, my understanding is it's not as simple as that. I don't think we legally can just do that. Now, you might say, well, therefore we need to leave the ECHR and da-da-da-da-da. But look, I think what we're seeing with the prison system, as with all of our public services, is that we're pouring more and more money into it and we're getting worse outcomes. So we're spending 51 grand per prisoner on average. And
per year?
Per year, on the average prisoner. And that is a huge amount of money, where what we're seeing is that reoffending rates are through the roof. We had a situation in the summer where we had something like 100 spaces left in our prisons. It was crazy that it was allowed to get to that point. So I think what this is about is looking at, David Gauke, former Justice Secretary, who's reviewing... conducting a full review into the justice system. He's putting all the options on the table and looking at evidence from other countries and other systems that have worked well. So this is one option is, well, it's cheaper to have people in open prisons. In Spain, for example, you're twice as likely not to reoffend if you're in an open prison versus a traditional prison.
Yeah.
So this might be one way of at least helping to tackle the problem.
I was going to say open prisons can be quite fun, but fun is the wrong word. They're quite interesting because there's one down near me and they have a cafe where the prisoners work and you can go there and have some lunch and talk to the prisoners. So it's fairly interesting on that front. But, Kane, we have had instances in this prison where I'm talking about near me where even though it's open and they can come and go as they please, you still have prisoners absconding and doing runners and not to be found again.
No, exactly. I mean, I'm from Sittingbourne, and on Sheppey, which is sort of the adjacent island to Sittingbourne, you have, I believe, 3 prisons, and I believe 2 of those are open prisons. And, again, they can do some fantastic work, but you've got to make sure that the prisoners who are in there are the right prisoners for that space. There's no point of having, violent criminals in those places when they're not ready to be there. And I think this is the problem that we have to tackle, is actually putting the people who do horrific crimes, who are never going to change, put them, lock them away and punish them for what they have done to innocent people and their victims. And just going back to your point about foreign criminals, I don't disagree. We do need to deport them, but what we also need to do is punish them for their crimes, because I don't want them going back to some country where they're not actually going to be punished for the crime that they have committed to a British person here.
Why should British taxpayers be funding their punishment? Just get them out of the country.
Because that victim deserves justice. They do deserve justice, Ben, and that is the point. And they must be punished by the British justice system. I do think they should be deported, but I do also think they have to be punished as well by British law, because that victim deserves justice that they need.
It's an interesting point, and one I actually admittedly hadn't thought of, but I just think, why would British taxpayers, why should they be forced to pay for these people from far away lands who shouldn't be here? They're a bunch of wrong-uns, just get them out of the country.
I get that point. I get that point. We shouldn't have let them in the first place. That's also the problem. But we should be making justice pay.
OK. Andy, in The Guardian, your favourite newspaper.
No, it's not.
No? Surprise, surprise. Nearly 2/3 of workers living in private rented housing struggle to pay their rent. That's according to a new poll. 2/3 of workers. So you're grafting, you're earning money, you still can't afford your rent. Broken Britain?
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is from the organisation Shelter, the homelessness charity, and what we're seeing is an increasingly fractured relationship between your ability to earn money and get on and live anything approaching a comfortable life. That is a really, really scary statistic. And what we're seeing, whether it's it's particularly acute in London, but elsewhere, is that the gap between average earnings and the amount of money you're paying in rent and the amount of money then it costs to buy a house, get on the housing ladder, that is something that's out of reach for so many people. So people are forced to rent, and landlords kind of have carte blanche to just, name your price. Rents are going up and up and up and up and up, and it is becoming unaffordable.
Sorry, Andy, to sound like a broken record, but surely we just go back to the immigration debate there. If there's far too many people in the country, and admittedly, government after government have not been building houses, why would you open the doors still to millions more people? You know the infrastructure's not there. Why keep doing it? It's just insanity.
I'd ask the people who made that policy decision. I don't think that is obviously one factor. I don't think it's as simple as that. You said yourself we need to build more houses. I think, unfortunately, Labour's housing target, while admirable, is pretty unrealistic.
Yeah. Pie in the sky.
We need to have the partnerships with the private sector so that we can get houses built quickly. I know that in the past, people like Jeremy Corbyn have proposed things like rent caps. I don't think that's a smart move either. It's complicated, but we need to sort this out.
It is, but
it's so unaffordable.
What I would say is on the housing issue, I'm a former estate agent, so I've seen it. You know, people really struggling.
Hiss.
I know. I only work for people the public hate, apparently. So, but no, I think there is a real problem with the housing system in general. I mean, I'm from Sittingbourne in North Kent, which has seen housing increase massively, change the fabric of that town hugely. And, you know, people are really, really annoyed about that. But what I would say is when you are building houses, we're not building the right sorts of homes for the demographics of those areas.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, what we're building are four-bedroom houses, which many people from London who have a flat in London can sell their £500,000 house and get a lovely four-bedroom down in somewhere like Kent. But, you know, someone like me who's grown up there wouldn't be able to afford a house in London or in Sittingbourne or wherever you are in the country, and that is a massive problem. So home ownership really should be the focus of this government and all governments, and it's far too long we haven't focused on that. But also we've had the Renters Reform Bill, which is actually going to make it even more difficult for landlords and actually put more burdens on them.
Why are we feeling sorry for landlords? I mean, I've no issue with people renting out their houses, but they've done very nicely, thank you.
Yeah, I know, but they actually relieve the state. They relieve the state. So then we're not putting people into social housing.
Landlords, Andy, are selling up en masse because they don't want to be dealing with tenants who they can't get out of their homes.
Exactly.
They're forced to pay...
Their homes, that's the point, their homes. They own those properties. It is their property that those tenants are in.
I just think if we were to make a list of the people who we should be feeling sorry for this Christmas, private landlords are quite a long way down that list.
Andy,
they've had a cushy ride for a long time.
Hang on a minute.
They're not...
It's not about a cushy ride. They are delivering a service that the state can't provide for people en masse. That is the problem.
And can I just say, Andy, as well, lots of landlords aren't these big corporate juggernauts with massive portfolios. They might be a son whose mother died and who has inherited the house and has been an accidental landlord.
Or they've invested properly. They've done the right thing. They got on in life. They've invested in property. And now they are actually helping the state to relieve the burden on social housing. That's the point.
OK, let's move on to one last story. The Daily Express, Andy. Just Stop Oil. Remember them? Activists are selling merchandise that has been made 4,000 miles away. They're getting it shipped to the UK and they're flogging it for £20 to gullible supporters here in Britain.
Yeah, completely agree with you. You know, I think Just Stop Oil, the climate crisis is real. It's a problem. It needs to be tackled. But Just Stop Oil and these sort of hard left activist groups give the cause, and it is a cause, a bad name. And I've just got no time for it at all. They are hypocrites, as you say. It's just so tedious.
You know, these eco-terrorists, as I like to call them, because that's what they are. They disrupt, they cause terror on the streets, and they have been shown to be the charlatans that they are. They've gone from being Che Guevara to the Wombles, quite frankly, and as soon as we get rid of them, the better.
Right, well, apparently their T-shirts are made in the Dominican Republic and they're transported 4,000 miles away to the UK and they're sold for £20, those infamous orange T-shirts.
That's what they all do, these eco-lefties, though, don't they? You know, it's whether, you know, you're Leonardo DiCaprio flying here and there, or even the Prime Minister who talks about, you know, reducing fossil fuels and takes private jets here and there. They all do it, they're all the same, and they all lie to us. That's the point.
That's part of Keir Starmer's job as Prime Minister, is to be going to other countries,
lecture everyone
building
else.
relationships with leaders.
Don't lecture everyone else. Don't lecture us saying, oh, you can't go on holiday, you can't do this, because it's going to affect the climate crisis.
Never said you can't go on holiday.
The point is, though, that the left perpetuate this idea that if we don't do these things, we're all going to go to hell in a handcart.
All right, and the thing with Just Stop Oil is, because their arguments are so, in my view, naive, they dilute all the other genuine environmental arguments. You've got plastics in the ocean, the cleanliness of our waterways, the seas and so on, because it just puts people off. They think environmentalism, they think of Just Stop Oil and the net zero deranged net zero scam. Anyway, time now for your news headlines with Mark White.
It's 11:34. Good morning to you. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. And we begin with some breaking news. The Metropolitan Police have charged a man with 4 counts of attempted murder. That's after 4 pedestrians were hit by a car in London's West End on Christmas Day. Anthony Gilheany has also been charged with causing serious injury by driving whilst disqualified and for the possession of a bladed weapon in a public place. One victim remains in a critical condition and is receiving treatment in hospital. Well, some more breaking news, and the German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier has dissolved Parliament to pave the way for a snap election on February the 23rd. It follows the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz losing a confidence vote earlier this month after weeks of infighting with his coalition partners on a 2025 budget and economic policy. South Korea's parliament has voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo. The move was triggered by a short-lived period of martial law declared by Mr. Han's predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol. Mr. Han says he will step aside to avoid more chaos. Well, sources have told the Reuters news agency that Russian air defences were responsible for downing an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan and killed 38 people. The plane was diverted from an area of southern Russia where Moscow has repeatedly used air defence systems against Ukrainian drone strikes when it crashed. Well, back to the UK, and a period of national rail disruption has begun today in efforts to allow for major engineering works, including for HS2. Meanwhile, Avanti workers are preparing to stage a 5-month-long series of strikes after pay negotiations broke down. Travellers are being advised to check before they travel. And finally, homeless shelters and food banks will receive surplus food from farmers as part of a £15 million initiative set to be launched by the government next year. The government currently estimates that around 330,000 tonnes of edible food a year is wasted. OK, you're right up to date with the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Now it's back to the Peter Pan of broadcast news. Yes, he's really 58. It's Ben Leo.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Mark White. Peter Pan with you on GB News this afternoon. I'm joined by Tom Harwood with Good Afternoon Britain coming up. Tom, Merry Christmas.
If you're Peter Pan, does that make me a lost boy?
Oh, there we go.
Or am I Captain Hook? I don't know. I think Captain Hook would be
a lost boy. A lost boy.
A lost boy.
I was going to say welcome back, I'm a real boy, but that's Pinocchio.
That is. You have to say welcome back, first star on the left and straight on till morning.
There we go. More of a Peter Pan fan than me. What's coming up in your show, Tom?
Well, we won't be talking about Peter Pan or indeed any panto, but we will be talking about the row that has erupted between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage. It's getting very personal. It's not very Christmassy for the spirit of goodwill. But the question, I suppose, is, does party membership matter? Does this translate to real-world electoral success? There will be a test of that, of course, in May. We'll see how various parties do at those local elections, although for Nigel Farage that might be a bit of a problem, given that it could well be that in his own patch and in some of those most reform-friendly areas of the country, the local elections could be cancelled.
Democracy in action, Tom. Democracy in action. With regards to... There's lots of conjecture about defamation, and Aaron Banks, the former UKIP Brexit Party donor, saying that Nigel should sue Kemi for defamation. What do you think they'll do on that front, reform? An apology from Kemi to put a line under it, that would equally be as embarrassing, wouldn't it?
It would be embarrassing, and it would drag the story on. I think the most extraordinary thing about this story is how it's all been created by a Twitter thread from the leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, the first rule of politics is if you are a third party, if you're the Lib Dems, if you're Reform, if you're an insurgent trying to get attention, look at what the Lib Dems did in the general election campaign, the water slides, the falling into lakes, all of this sort of nonsense, just to get on the telly, to be seen, to be heard. Now, most newspapers wouldn't run Reform has X number of members as like a big story, as a leading story. But now that Kemi Badenoch has come out and criticised it, the story isn't the number of members Reform has, it's the criticism of Kemi Badenoch. It turns it into a bigger story, and it means that you and I are talking about it now. It means that the BBC is running this story. It means that everywhere you look, you're hearing about it. I think Nigel Farage will be very pleased that this row is going on.
Have you heard anything, Tom, from any sources about the scenario in which Kemi fired off that tweet? I mean, was she just enjoying her Boxing Day, sat on the sofa and tweeting? Was it an advisor? Any idea what's going on?
I don't know the specific circumstances of that tweet, but I do know Kemi does write a lot of her own tweets, and it was certainly written in her style. I would be massively surprised if this hadn't gone past advisors as well, given she is now the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition. But I do have to just say, before I go, in the last few moments, a probe has passed the sun at the closest point that any man-made object has ever got to the sun. It sort of skimmed the outer atmosphere.
I saw this, yeah.
And we'll be talking to a planetary scientist about what that means for all of us.
Amazing. Love that. I love space, I love planets, I love the universe. I think NASA said that although it was the closest a probe had ever been, apparently the functionality of the probe, the doors were fine, everything works thus far. Thank you, Tom.
It helps that it was travelling at 430,000 miles an hour.
Oh, nice. Just a crawl, then. Just a crawl. Thank you, Tom. Look forward to that. Coming up, we're heading to Stormont as unsealed documents reveal the secrets of the IRA. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Back in a tick.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's a cloudy and murky end to the week with fog and some patchy drizzle in places, and it is going to be feeling rather cold under those cloudier skies too, where we see more persistent outbreaks of rain and drizzles just where we find this trailing frontal system just to the far northwest of the country. High pressure dominating elsewhere, but there's lots of cloud and moisture trapped underneath that high, so quite a cloudy and murky day ahead, likely to see some quite foggy conditions lingering on through much of the day too, with some drizzle, particularly around hilly areas. And that more persistent rain and drizzle stays to the far northwest of Scotland at times, where it's likely to be quite grey. And as I say, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, but slightly milder across parts of Scotland, highs of 9 to 10 Celsius. Now, as we head into the evening, once again, that cloud and those outbreaks of drizzle likely to linger on in the far northwest of Scotland, largely cloudy elsewhere, perhaps some clearer spells around Aberdeenshire. And once again, across Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England, fairly cloudy, still foggy at times with those outbreaks of drizzle. And it's fairly similar across much of England and Wales too. And that leads us into a largely cloudy night. Once again, fairly similar conditions with some fog, some low cloud, and also some drizzle in places. And once again, those outbreaks of rain still lingering on across parts of northwest Scotland, perhaps just edging in to western parts of Northern Ireland later on into the day. So once again, remaining fairly cloudy, drizzly at times, and in some places temperatures not really changing compared to what they were during the day. Now, to start off on the weekend, there's not much change. Once again, plenty of cloud across the country. This area of rain slowly sinking its way southwards, turning clearer to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers following on behind. And once again, those temperatures really struggling under cloudier skies, highs of around 8 Celsius in the south, but we could see 10 Celsius across parts of Scotland.
Hi there.